If you want to ask me any of your questions, you can ask me questions. You can put your questions in the chat. The link to join me on this chat is there in the live stream conversation that's happening. So feel free to join the conversation however you'd like. I just made a video that got kind of big for our channel. It got 4,000 views, so I will happily go over that if there's no other questions or if people don't have any other things that you want to ask. So feel free to like pop into the chat, ask me questions, let me know where you stand theologically, or let me know what information you'd like to run by me or what questions you have. Happily ask. You can ask me anything that you'd like, and I will take all questions from all comers. Okay. Well, oh, there we go. Okay. Noob subscriber. Oh, all right. Yes. Hey, new subscriber, Burning71. Great to have you here. Am I multi-streaming or just YouTube? At the moment, I'm just on YouTube. I was supposed to be on TNC Apologetics stream. He's not live streaming. He didn't tell me why he didn't reach out, but I suspect it's because he's got a lot going on in his life and he's got finals coming up. So this is a very last minute thing that I decided to do just since I had blocked out this time to be on live. Burning71, what is your theology? What's your theological background? Feel free to put it in the chat if you'd like. And you can ask me any other questions you have in the chat, or you can ask me whatever you'd like. And again, if you're just joining us, I was going to be live streaming on a friend's YouTube channel. That would be TNC Apologetics, but he, I think, didn't go live. He's got some stuff going on. So, you can ask me any questions you want. I do have some starter questions that I could always pop up and put in the conversation. Let's see. Well, all right. I can start with this question. We just had actually some really interesting news, fairly decent evidence for life on another planet. We're starting to get some biosignatures on other planets. We could talk about how that influences theological questions. Protestant, Pentecostal, any thoughts or criticism? Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of I think Protestant's really kind of an umbrella term, as is Pentecostal to maybe a slightly lower degree. I am kind of in the school of thought where I think you find the right lessons and you find the right community. Most of the Christians that I'm around, if you say, what type of Christian are you? They either don't know a lot about their own beliefs outside of just saying that they're Christian, or they don't really care. C.S. Lewis, in his book Mere Christianity, makes the argument that unless you really have a very, very strong burning desire that we should all just be generic kind of general Christians, that we shouldn't pick a particular denomination. I kind of really have essentially the same feelings. I've been talking to a lot of Mormons. I've been talking to some Jehovah's Witnesses recently. I think those are a little bit out there, but I think if you're a Christian and you're studying the New Testament, you're on the right track. I'm so early on in my studies in terms of as most of you probably already know if you're here on this channel, I was a lifelong atheist. I was an atheist for all my life. I started off in a kind of orthodoxy tradition of Sunni Muslim, and I became an atheist probably when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And after kind of moving away from a religion, coming back to religion was very statistically low as a probability for me. In other words, once you go from religious to atheist, that tends to be very statistically sticky. So I am now sort of back in engaging with a theological tradition, and that is Christianity. But I would call myself sort of a mere Christian. There is really an online group that appeals to me quite a bit for their Christian beliefs. They're called The Way. The Way. I only know them from a couple of Reddit and Facebook chats that I'm in. But their goal is to follow Christianity without all the doctrine and dogma that got layered on top of Christianity after essentially the 2nd century or so. It's a very fascinating theological lens of looking at Christianity. So anyways, I kind of like that belief system. So here's another question for you in the audience if you're checking this out. And Burning 7-1, feel free to ask me more questions. You're welcome to put any other questions you have in the chat, and I'll happily answer your other questions. Again, I was supposed to be online with TNC Apologetics. If I do hear from him, and I am sort of watching his channel right now, if he logs in, then I'll log out and switch over. So here's my question for all of you, which is, how do you all think AI, as a widely accessible modality, is changing people's theological experience? I'm kind of curious to know your insights on that. Has AI changed theological experiences for you? Um, Let me know your thoughts on that. I think AI is sort of an interesting thing. I actually work with AI in a much more scientific, narrow field, and I find the evolution of AI very interesting. I do think that some fringe arguments are going to gradually become less popular as AI keeps evolving and as we continue to engage with it more and more. But you're welcome to ask me anything in this chat, by the way. You're welcome to ask me about your thoughts. If you're Christian, you're welcome to ask me questions about Christianity. If you're an atheist and you want to oppose Christianity and have a conversation about that, you're also definitely 100% welcome to do that. So, yeah, feel free to ask me any questions that you have in the chat. But I would love to know if you're just joining us, let me know how you think AI has changed people's theological experiences. That's something that I'm really curious to know about. So, if you're engaged in any kind of theological discourse or any kind of spiritual journey, do you use AI? Do other people around you use AI? And if so, how is that changing your experience? Let me know in the comment section. Um, I just released a new book, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I think most of the debate between apologetics and atheists tends to be about causative and mechanistic questions. I think that's kind of fine and it's very interesting, but it doesn't, I think, get you closer to sort of theological enlightenment or theological enrichment or nourishment. So, one of the things that I've been saying for a long time now is that it's essentially the domain of science to ask and attempt to answer how type questions about the universe that we see around ourselves. So, how type questions would be like, how do we get here? How did we evolve? How did life start? Those are to me the domain of scientific questions, and the domain of theological questions is sort of more why type questions. Is there a greater purpose? Is there a purpose that we're not able to see? That's where I sort of like branch off in the way most apologetics and atheists debate with each other. I think that if you're interested in theological discourse, you should be asking more why type questions. I think if you're interested in scientific discourse, you can ask those sort of mechanistic and how type questions. So I am taking questions right now during this live stream from any and all comers. So let me know your thoughts in the chat. You're welcome to ask me anything in this chat. You can put your questions in the chat or let me know where you stand on stuff. Dale is here. I don't know who Dale is, but hey, Dale, welcome to the channel. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, Tavo, how's it going?
Oh, Dale. Hey, how's it going, Dale? I do
Hey,
know who
that's
you are.
me, Dale the Real Seekers.
Yeah, yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was listening. I was interested in I think the first thing that you said because you were talking about there about the Protestants versus Orthodox, and do we have to figure that out, or can we just be sort of a Christian essentials, see, a mere Christianity, and make arguments that way? And I was just kind of curious on your thoughts. There was a debate between David Wood. Not sure if you're familiar with David Wood's work on.
Yeah. I know David Wood. Yeah, fascinating individual. He's
Yeah,
a he's like a sociopath, right? And he was like a criminal, and he murdered somebody. I think his dad, or attempted to murder.
he attempted to kill his dad with a hammer. Yeah, and
I realize that's totally a side story and probably not relevant to the question that you're going to ask, but he is a fascinating individual. I enjoy hearing him talk. I think he's got a great argumentation style. He's really powerful. But go on. Yeah, keep going.
yeah, so he got into a famous scuffle with Jay Dyer, the Eastern Orthodox guy, and that led to him doing a debate. And basically, the Orthodox were trying to say that David Wood and every God Logic and his kind of crew, they were trying to say, well, you guys are just grifters because all you argue for is an anti-Islam type argument.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
and they were trying to say, well, that's invalid. You can't argue like that. You have to first have something positive. What is your positive belief that you're advocating for? So their argument was, well, until you can refute Orthodoxy, Catholicism, and prove that your Protestantism is true, you can't go out and debate against Muslims and stuff like that. So I was just kind of curious, yeah, what were your thoughts on that?
So let me give you my own personal thoughts, and then I'll give you like my sort of more theological thoughts. You may not know this about me, but I was raised in a very Orthodox Sunni Muslim environment, right? And I became an atheist when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And I think I told you that I was an atheist because I think I'll probably just keep this video private unless we get on something really interesting. But anyway, so I again started off as very atheistic, and then I was that way basically for my entire adult life. I do find that IP, God Logic, David Wood, who argue against uh, Islamic theology, I find their arguments to be very persuasive and very cogent and very important for the public discourse. But I do find that sometimes they drift a little bit too far for my taste into content that's really acrimonious and acerbic, so it becomes really argumentative and very charged. And that's one of the reasons why I actually came up with the CTF argument. Because one of the nice things about CTF is it's like, okay, let's weigh the merits of every religion in a way that's objective and empirical, and then see which one does the best, which one performs the best. And then we have some objectivity, and we also have some criteria. And so that's one of the things that inspired me to create CTF, was to really have like sort of all religions starting from a fairly even playing field. So that's kind of my personal experiential lens of that debate. The other theological lens is, yeah, I think you should be, every statement that you make against Islam, against LDS, against Jehovah's Witnesses, should be buttressed by statements about your own theology. Some people are pretty good about doing that. I think David Wood is actually not too bad about doing that most of the time. So some people are actually pretty good about saying, like, I'm not just going to argue against this other religion as a straw man. I'm also going to argue for my own religion and insert those. And I think that's important to do. I think if you can only argue against it, I don't know what's that guy Sam Russell who wrote that book Waking Up. He's a big
Oh,
atheist. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Sam. I know who you're talking about. He's one of
Yeah,
the
I'm
four
blanking on
new
his name. It's not
atheists.
Russell. It's
Sam Harris.
Sam Harris. Yeah, yeah, Sam
Yeah.
Harris. I knew it was something fairly common. Anyways, I like the first half of that book, you know, but all he's doing is breaking down other traditions. And I read that book when I was an atheist, and even as an atheist, reading the book, I was like, I wish there were more that was like, I wish there were more that was like building up something. Anyone can just break something down, but is he really building anything up? In other words, I was kind of hoping in the second half of his book he would, hey, what's up? Modern atheism is on.
Hey,
Um,
welcome.
yeah. So I was hoping that, and I kind of, that's kind of what I reflect on the debate. I wish people would not be like so denigrating of other belief systems and would spend more of that effort propping up their own belief system. So, same question back to you, Dale. What do you think about that? Like, what do you think about the debate? Has it gotten too acrimonious? How do you prevent it from being acrimonious? How do you get the truth to percolate up through moments of like really bitter debate?
So I guess two things then. So I fully agree with you and David Wood against uh what the Orthodox Andrew Wilson. He's the famous guy Andrew Wilson.
Oh yeah, Andrew Wilson. Yeah.
Yeah, that's who David Wood was debating there, and
Oh
he was
wow.
defending Jay Dyer. So I totally disagree with Andrew Wilson and Jay Dyer. You don't have to be an expert on refuting Eastern Orthodoxy versus Protestantism in order to go out and argue against argue against Islam and in favor of a mere Christianity type thing. Now that's where the debate is. Obviously, David Wood is coming from the position that the biblical Christianity is that mere Christianity. There are a certain set of essentials that can be shared by various denominations, right? So the church is not limited to one individual denomination. And I get Jay Dyer, that's what he's challenging, right? He says, no, it's orthodox or nothing kind of thing, right? So
Yeah,
that's where
yeah.
there can be a debate kind of thing between them. But they needed to understand David Wood is coming from it. His opinion is that there is this mere Christianity which is beyond mere denominational disputes and stuff, right? Jesus' resurrection, belief in God, repenting of your sins and stuff like that. So those certain gospel essentials. In terms of the tone of the debate, so once we affirm, yeah, David Wood is affirming the gospel, and he's also doing good work in going against Islam. There is this issue. He is upfront and stuff that he engages in Islamic polemics, right, attacking Islam, and to some extent, I do think there is precedent for going on the offensive in certain circumstances, right? So with Muslims especially, they've kind of mentioned this is a strategy on their part because of cultural concerns. A lot of Muslims respond to a more aggressive or polemical type tone, or if you're more assertive when you're presenting arguments and stuff like that. And to that extent, if you're able to do that in a way that's edifying, then I agree with it. That said, when you play that thing, it's so easy to cross the line. And on that front, I would agree with you. Sometimes it both sides cross that line, and it's not a polemic in a way that's not edifying. It's just I'm repaying insult for insult, or I'm just making fun of you and mocking your belief just for the heck of it and stuff like that. And once that happens, that's where it gets sinful. So yeah, there's a place for polemics. I would, Jesus himself engaged in polemics and stuff, but it has to be done for in a proper way, and it's very easy to cross the line if you're not careful. And I'll admit myself, sometimes I've crossed that line with certain atheists and skeptics online. So yeah.
Well, you know what? I find that one of the things that is probably a real challenge for you is you engage with atheists who are really, really argumentative, very acerbic, and they do not I mean, somebody looked at my comment section of one of my videos and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is horrific. This is a bloodbath." Because everyone's like sort of like really arguing with each other. And I mean, I've told you before that I kind of struggle with this because I do feel like things get so argumentative, and I try to be extremely kind and generous, but I feel like you are engaging with people who um, for instance, Paulo Gia, as you know, there are many good reasons why I admire Paulo Gia. I think he's a really interesting character. I think he's a great content creator. I don't know that he's always 100%. Um, oh, this is a nice compliment. We'll say hi to Connor Sam really quick, and I'll interrupt my train of thought. Hello, Connor Sam, and also thank you for this comment. New to the channel, you seem to be a more honest and genuine Christian channel. Thank you for your content. That's a really kind compliment. Thanks very much, Connor Sam. Welcome to the conversation. And while I'm answering your question, I'll put this question from Discvol. I know Discvol's asked us several questions in the past. Thoughts on variants of Christianity that argue against the Trinity? We can talk about that next. But I think you're in a difficult position, Dale, because you're engaging with people who are, I don't want to say unscrupulous, but who are really willing to denigrate a perspective to get their point across. Now, I do think that that Christians are generally very nice people. If you go up to a Christian and you say, I disagree with you, they'll generally be pretty polite. If you go up to an atheist and say, I disagree with people, present company excluded, especially Juan of Modern Atheism, who's a really great interlocutor. But I think there's a higher chance, at least, that they'll say, well, you're just dumb. You know, I think that's sort of a response that you're going to get that's more likely. Um, Coming from a very steeped cultural background myself, in Morocco, there is some of that's cultural. In other words, I know that if I were presenting my argument to people who are my own countrymen, that that my stance of epistemic humility and calibrated uncertainty would not be very popular. In other words, they would take any statement of uncertainty as evidence that I was losing the debate and they were winning. So you do have to walk that line of being really confident in what you're saying. And I think especially with in engaging with the Muslim audience, there's the debate can get very like strident very quickly. And in debating atheists, often not for everybody, obviously, this is obviously just a generalization, but I kind of see you as somebody who's really on the forefront of engaging with a lot of different people, and I think that's in some ways an unenviable position that you're in, because you're engaging with atheists who are really um, quite willing to denigrate people personally to get their point across. What do you think about that? Am I way off?
No, I think you're totally correct. Although I will say I am grateful for the times when I've dealt with atheists. Obviously, within academia, it's night and day from what you see on YouTube commenters, skeptics
Oh,
versus
100%,
real
100%.
skeptics.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this is totally foreign. So I get where you're coming from, where it's like this total culture shock where like, okay, you do research for a show, and you mean Unitarians. No, I'm not sure what Juan's asking me there.
No, but Modern Atheism's a really great channel. I hope people will check it out. Modern Atheism, check it out, people. He's got a really fantastic channel. Also has an ethos of humility and kind engagement and steel manning the opposition, which is admirable, I think. And you, Dale, have admitted sometimes when you've admitted, you've said, I lost this debate. And I think
Yeah,
that's something
yeah,
that very few people do.
yeah. I think, yeah. Look, truth has to be our goal, and believe it or not, even with the Muslims, they respected me when I kind of admitted I lost a debate to a guy named Orthodox Muslim and stuff like that. And I thought, I did lose the debate. That didn't mean I lost necessarily the argument or that what I was saying was untrue and stuff. But, people, they kind of showed respect that I was willing, the heck with just trying to win a debate or score points or something like that. So there is that to bear in mind, right? So I think in everything we do, at least as Christians, but like we want to be doing what we're doing for an edifying purpose. It serves the truth, and it serves ourselves and the people that we're dialoguing with and stuff like that. When I approach debates, people might say it's very naive, but I actually genuinely do try to persuade my interlocutor that I'm right. Like I actually do try to engage them personally. I'm not just, oh, they've already made up their minds, so I'm just going to ignore him and put on a show for the audience and stuff like that. I actually do try to persuade the audience and also persuade my interlocutor that I've got what's right. So it's a genuine conversation. I'm actually talking to them, kind of thing, and listening to what they say as well. If they make a good point, I'll try to admit it.
Well, definitely check out Dale's channel. Dale's got a really fantastic channel, and if you're watching the conversation and lurking in the background, feel free to subscribe to this channel. I live stream every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm live streaming right now because I was supposed to be on with TNC Apologetics. We can talk about him next, but he's not online. I think he said he was going to be, but he's got a lot of stuff going on in his life, and he's taking finals right now, so certainly understandable. Do you want to take on this question? Thoughts on variants of Christianity that argue against the Trinity?
That argue against the Trinity. So, I would say so. I think that the Trinity, I guess, depending on what you mean by that, is a Christian essential. So, you're not a variant of Christianity proper if you deny the Trinity. Now, by that, it depends. Well, what do you mean by the Trinity? Am I saying, well, you have to believe in a specific? I did a debate with Juan from Modern Atheism just the other day, last week with Phil Bear, And I go for Dr. William Lane Craig's Trinity monotheism model. Um, do I exclude you as a Christian if you disagree with that model? No, of course not. There's nothing in the Bible that says having a certain specific philosophical understanding of the Trinity, even if it's true, that's necessary for salvation. So that it's not necessarily on that front. But if by Trinity we affirm whatever propositions the Bible itself, the New Testament scriptures tells us are essential, that's where there's a problem. And that's where I go for on the biblical model. I think Dr. Richard Bauckham's divine identity thesis shows us very clearly that there are three specific persons or individuals that people that stand in I thou relations to each other and have their own independent mind, their own independent will. That's what modern philosophers call a persons. Maybe in the Bible they would say they're individuals or something like that. But these three individuals are identified as Yahweh, the one true biblical God. And that's what the Bible affirms is necessary. You have to believe Jesus is Yahweh. He shares the identity of Yahweh. So does the Holy Spirit by implication. And that God the Father, obviously, is Yahweh. That's what I think is essential. If you deny that, so if you are like a Mormon or Jehovah's Witness, you're not Christianity because you're denying even that biblical essential of Jesus. You're saying Jesus, no, he's not identified with Yahweh, kind of thing. Does that make sense as to where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, what if somebody is, what if somebody's a modalist? You, are they wrong? Are they going against the Bible? And how wrong are they if they're like, okay, and for those of people who are in the chat who aren't familiar with this doctrine, modalism kind of means like the sort of cycles in God has separate modes of interacting over time.
Yeah, he's different modes of existing, right? Like he
Yeah,
takes
so
on
it's
different
sort of
roles.
one entity is God, and then God incarnated as Jesus. In other words, before the moment that Jesus existed, there was sort of a modal separation between, you know, in other words, yeah, these are like sort of sequential modal means of interacting.
Yeah, so if you take that view, I think it's biblically incorrect because the Bible clearly states there are three distinct individuals. So you have to take a social Trinitarian model. You can't take a Latin or antisocial Trinitarian model along the lines that the Orthodox or the Catholics take. I don't think you can believe in a monarchian type view, and you certainly can't believe in modalism kind of thing without that incurring error. Um, is that error going to prevent you from being saved and stuff like that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that because at one point I myself was unknowingly a modalist. So I think some Christians could be modalists and not know it. But if they have a proper understanding of what that is and a proper understanding of biblical material, then they would be expected to know better, I think, and realize, yeah, Jesus is a separate person. He's not the same as God the Father, and that's just clear from the biblical reading. But if you just come to that conclusion, I compared God to ice at one time. Clearly, modalism, but this was when I was like 12 years old and didn't know any better and stuff like that. So I don't think I was. I would still
When
say
you
it.
say you compared God to ice, do you mean like ice, water, vapor? Is that sort of?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
different.
is that? I don't know that. Do you consider that to be strictly modalism? Like, I feel like that's just sort of an analogy that you could use to explain the Trinity to somebody.
Yeah, it's an analogy, but I think it's still representing modalism, right? Taking on different modes or roles or something, right? So you could say God takes on, okay, he's the role of the father, he's also a son, and he's also a brother or something like that. Um,
Yeah. Well. Modern atheism says, I don't think I've ever heard Tavo's view on the Trinity. I actually did a review of the debate between God Logic and Jacob Hansen. Jacob Hansen's a really great Mormon LDS uh, apologist. I think everyone's familiar with God Logic as a force of nature and argues for the Christian perspective and the traditional Trinity. So I thought it was a really great debate. And in that debate review, I kind of refined and explained what I think is a resolution of the two perspectives and a reconciliation. In other words, I kind of think that I found an area of compatibility between God Logic and Jacob Hansen. Now, that area of compatibility was in omnitemporality. So, and this is a little bit hard to explain, but and again, I please know that I'm not a theologian. I'm not a so if you're taking this as theological advice, don't. I'm very early on in my journey, and I prefer to advocate for Christianity broadly, and I don't get into like this is how the Trinity works because I think that's sort of mechanistic, and I think it's also fraught because there are many things about it that our understanding may be inadequate for. But let me put it to you this way. So the way I think of God is that God is omnitemporal, right? So in other words, Jesus essentially, as part of God, would be omnitemporal as well and pre-existed the universe. Now, if you believe in Minkowski spacetime, which is the basis of relativistic physics, which is we're pretty certain that relativity is how the universe works. We know it's not quite complete. It works in almost every capacity that we've tested it. It works on almost all scales, except when you get down to the very, very small quantum scale, it seems to break down, and we don't know what happens to it. But almost everyone agrees that relativistic physics is a valid way of looking at the universe. So Minkowski spacetime is the framework on which relativity works. All right. Now that just says that space and time are intertwined. So there's no such thing as space without time, and vice versa. Right. So if God is omnipresent, if God occupies every location in space, then God must therefore, if you believe in Minkowski spacetime, be omnitemporal. So, as I frequently argued, the reason why this is important is because it's sort of once you understand that God is omnitemporal, it recontextualizes the atheist versus apologetical debate in a lot of different ways. What I was talking on about earlier in when we first went live is this most debates between apologists and Christians tend to be very mechanistic. In other words, how could evolution work? How did the universe get here? How did humans come to exist? These are all very mechanistic questions. I prefer to think of those as how type questions, and I think that those are firmly in the domain of the sciences. Now, I look at theological questions as sort of why type questions. In other words, what is the purpose? Is there a greater purpose? I think morality and beauty and maybe even love are in the domain of sort of how type questions that we can understand without strict scientism. When we look at things in the natural world, we say, did God do this? I think it's really better to sort of think of those as mechanistic questions that should remain the domain of the sciences. Now, when people engage with them from an apologetical standpoint, I think that's wholly valid, and it becomes an interesting conversation. But now, this is how that relates to the Trinity. If God is omnitemporal, then any entity that's part of God that would have and this is why this is not modalism. So Jesus came to exist. We would perceive that as a specific moment in a specific point in our timeline. But if you're holding the universe from the outside and looking at it, the timeline isn't something that you're seeing pass along in front of you, right? Instead, what you're seeing is the timeline would look more like the surface of a sphere. So it would look like sort of a closed loop. And as you're looking at that timeline, you would see past, present, and future all simultaneously, right? So uh, basically, so Jesus, we would look at the interaction point between the divine and our realm as a specific point of the incarnation of Jesus. Now, that's a very esoteric explanation of the Trinity, and I think omnitemporality resolves a lot of the paradoxes and conundrums of the Trinity that surfaced in the debate between Logic and Jacob Hansen. So people should check out my video on that. But the other reason why I think that's helpful is because it sort of contextualizes the relationship in a slightly different way. If you kind of think about it, let's imagine that there's God the Father and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and how they would be relating to each other. The way I see it is this: imagine that you're God and you're sitting down to play a video game. Well, your character in the video game, your avatar, that's Jesus, right? Now, the Holy Spirit would be like the platform, so the Nintendo or whatever video game platform that because that is the mechanism that imbues the universe. So the Holy Spirit is that sort of the fabric of the video game, the fabric of the paradigm in which the video game exists. Jesus is sort of a character who exists in the video game. So that's why I think if you kind of imagine as an analogy for humans, if we created an immersive reality, if we created a universe, we would almost certainly, without a doubt, incarnate ourselves into that video game to try to experience it. So to me, that makes the 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 Trinity itself much more palatable to most people. Now, the reason why this isn't modalism is because God is omnitemporal. So we would experience those as different modes of interaction, but we would see them all through a different lens than an extratemporal or omnitemporal being would see them. So that to me resolves some of the paradoxes of the Trinity. I know some of that stuff is kind of heady. I do a better explanation for that stuff in the video that I did on the debate between God Logic and Jacob Hansen. But that's my view on the Trinity. I think it's sort of natural to think that if God created the universe, then of course at some point in our timeline, God would incarnate into the universe to interact with us, because that's what we would do. Anyways, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious. So obviously, you believe in the tenseless theory of time and a Minkowskian interpretation of the special theory of relativity. I'm just kind of curious. Did you deal with alternative views? So for example, there's at least three interpretations. There's Albert Einstein's original interpretation, which was the opposite, which was favored the reality of tense, the A theory of time. Then there's the Minkowski view, which came in, I think, 1908. And that's, yeah, space time and stuff like that is all intertwined, as you were saying, as a continuum. And then there's the neo-Lorentzian view, which denies that and says, no, the A theory of time is true. Yeah, I was just curious if you covered that, and if not, if you want, I can play like a quick 4-minute clip of a show I did, just kind of explaining those views. If you're interested in that, it's your show though.
Oh yeah, sure. You're welcome to do that. I want to kind of contrast the A theory of time with the B theory of time, which is like sort of a presentism. The
Mhm.
B theory is the presentism, right?
No,
Or
that's
is
the A.
the A theory is presentism? Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You actually, I remember you engaged with this on one of your videos. So, but why don't you play your clip and we'll take a look at that, and then we'll address some more questions from modern atheism.
All
Do you
right.
have it queued up, or
I have it queued up. Yeah, it's just it's like 4 or 5 minutes or something.
I don't know how to put it on the channel. So,
See
but
it
if
in the
you
queue,
oh, okay. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Okay.
and
All right. Yeah.
if you put your mouse over it and raise it up onto the screen, just let me know when it's on your screen.
Oh, okay. I guess I have to remove this thing before I add it to the screen. Okay, great. There it
All
is.
right. Okay.
Three main interpretations of special been at least three main interpretations of special relativity. The first was Einstein's original 1905 paper, where he represented special relativity in terms of an A theory of time with three-dimensional objects enduring through time. In 1908, the physicist Hermann Minkowski showed that the theory could be much more simply presented in terms of this four-dimensional geometrical presentation. And so he proposed this space-time interpretation of special relativity, which Einstein then adopted and became then the standard textbook way of explaining the theory to students. But in addition to this, there was H.A. Lorentz's view, which was that relativity is a feature of the subjective perspective of the various finite observers in space-time who are in motion relative to a fundamental reference frame. And since uniform motion affects the speed of one's clocks, that affects how different observers in motion will measure the amount of time elapsed. So on Lorentz's view, there is absolute time, absolute length, absolute motion, but these are simply undetectable by us through our measuring.
Oh, why don't you pause it there, Dale?
So those are.
Can you pause it just for a second? Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit because Juan says you get a strike if it goes on for too long uninterrupted. I don't know if that's a real issue since my channel isn't monetized, but
it's not an issue if you're not monetized.
Okay.
I do it all the time. Yeah.
Okay, all right. If I'm okay with that, if you want to keep, now I've interrupted you and we've talked a little bit, so I'm okay if you want to keep playing it.
Sounds good. But so that first part that at least explains the alternative interpretations in a nutshell, right? And what I want to play the last couple minutes, there's actually empirical evidence against the Minkowski view favoring the Neo-Lorentzian view.
3 alternative ways of presenting the theory. They are empirically equivalent and therefore cannot be adjudicated simply on the basis of empirical evidence. Although I do hasten to add that in recent decades, there has been very dramatic evidence coming out of quantum theory that tends to support Lorentz's interpretation over Einstein's or Minkowski's. But our listeners need to understand that there are various physical interpretations of the same mathematical core of the theory. The mathematical equations are the same in every case. It's just that there are 3 different physical interpretations of the theory. And Lorentz's and Einstein's were both fully compatible with the objectivity of tense and temporal becoming.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
David.
Go
ahead, Dale.
Just a very quick follow-up. We do have time, so sorry to hog the limelight, but Dr. I am kind of interested. That was something that was interesting to me, finding out that really the reason why people prefer one interpretation of relativity over another is it's mainly philosophical in nature. But there was that aspect where you mentioned there's some empirical evidence that actually seems to favor the Neo-Lorentzian view. And I forget what it is. It Bell's theorem?
Yes, Bell's theorem and the so-called EPR experiment.
Do you mind just taking a couple minutes to explain that for people? Because I think that's important.
The EPR experiment involves sending 2 photons in opposite directions into space. And then you perform a measurement on one of the photons. And quantum theory requires that the other photon automatically and immediately takes on the correlating value. Now, no causal signal could be propagated from the measured photon fast enough to reach the other photon, which is receding at the speed of light. And therefore, you've got a real problem here because it seems to imply absolute simultaneity. If you continue to hold to relativity theory in the face of the EPR experiment, what it implies is that in some reference frames, you would have signals going backwards in time. They would be received before they were sent, which is pathological. So in order to avoid these backward signals in time, the best interpretation is Lorentz's, to say that there is a relation of absolute simultaneity. This is disclosed in the EPR experiments.
All right, so I think that's enough, kind of thing. But
Why don't
yeah,
you drop the link for that in the comment section in the chat, and
yeah.
yeah, feel free to I'll put back
Oh,
up the question that we were talking about earlier, but
I'll put it in the private chat because I can't post on your public thing. So
oh,
that
sure. If you put it anywhere, I'll make sure it gets put in the channel description.
yeah, I put it in the private chat so you can just copy and paste it anytime.
Gosh, I gotta find that private chat. I'm not good at finding the private chat.
It's wherever you have comments, there should be private chat next to it.
Okay, well, I'll work on that later. Yeah,
Okay.
but
Okay.
there it is, private chat. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So the advantage of neo-Lorentzian time is it does a better job of preserving free will. That's my understanding. That's kind of one of the aspects of the appeal to it. Is that correct? Libertarian free will is kind of more intact.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because on a B theory of time, you have to postulate that like we aren't people here and now. I'm just sort of, if you picture a slice of bread, we're what are called spatiotemporal worms, right, which is a four-dimensional object. So me, Dale, I'm actually all of my life, right? I'm a spatiotemporal worm from the year I was born, the day I was born, all the way up to thing, and I'm divided up into slices, like a loaf of bread that's divided up into slices. And the Dale that's talking to you right now, I'm not really a real person. I'm not really Dale at all. I'm just a spatiotemporal slice of the worm Dale, kind of thing, which is who I really am, and that's complicated notion for personhood, right? Because no, I'm fully present. I am a full person right here, right now, and in that sense, it may have implications for free will and stuff like that, right?
It does, but I mean, I think there's always reconciliations, and I don't know that I really believe in full libertarian free will. I sort of tend to think of the question as, do we have moral agency, rather than do we have full free will?
Okay. Well,
But
there. Oh, sorry. There are. Sorry to interrupt.
no, go ahead.
There are five conditions for true freedom, libertarian, or there are five conditions of freedom on which libertarians and determinists or compatibilists differentiate. One of which is agency, right? So it's just denied. Agent causation is sort of denied on the B theory. Sorry, on the compatibilism notion, right? Because technically speaking, it's caused not through the agent or the agent's will, but it's caused through a series of prior antecedent causes going all the way back to the beginning of time and stuff like that. So that would be one thing: is agencies denied. Another thing, and then I'll shut up and let you talk. One of the most important things for me, even though it's a lot of philosopher academics think it's not as important, is the ability condition for freedom. So in order to have real freedom, libertarian free will, you have to have a dual ability or a categorical ability, meaning the ability to will to do something or will to choose something, but also you have the ability to will to refrain from doing or something. If you don't have libertarian free will, you just have a one way or a conditional or a hypothetical ability to do otherwise, and I would argue that's just insufficient for any sense of freedom.
I mean, but I guess I've had this conversation with a few different people, and if you're just joining us, by the way, don't forget you can ask any questions in the chat. This is meant to be sort of open-ended, any and all questions. So you can come at me with some questions if you're Christian and you have uncertainties. Doubts are freely expressed here, and we're not going to judge you for anything. You can put some questions in the chat or join the chat if you're an atheist, and you want to sort of challenge some of the things that we're saying. And while I'm thinking about it, let me copy and paste. I'll also copy and paste the link to join the conversation. So if anyone out there wants to join the conversation, feel free. Just so you all know, this is kind of an ad hoc thing. I did this without too much planning. The reason was because I was going to be on TNC Apologetics channel, so I did block off this time to live stream, but TNC Apologetics didn't show up, which is fine. He's got a lot of stuff going. He's an undergrad student. I don't know if you know his channel, Dale. It's probably worth you checking out his channel, and I should probably make an email introducing the two of you to each other, because I kind of see you as like, I wouldn't say like an elder statesman, but like sort of an intermediate role where you've been doing this for a long time. You have a lot of relationships. You're very you have a lot of like insight into where the online discussion has been and where it's going in the future. So I really think that there's a lot of young, up and coming, fantastic Christian small content creators that could really benefit from having a deeper relationship with you. So anyways, it's just that's just something for down the road. Now, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds great. I haven't heard of this person, TNC Apologetics, before, but yeah, I like helping anyone and everyone. Right? We're all on the same team, so yeah, I'd love to do that. And yeah, over to you. I just want to apologize. I realized, yeah, this was supposed to be a show with multiple people. I just sort of joined in when I saw you were by yourself there, but. Yeah,
no, yeah, perfect. Yeah, no, this is just kind of an ad hoc thing. I blocked off this time I was supposed to live stream on. I was going to be on TNC Apologetics channel. So, and he's a great content creator and stuff. So, people should check out his channel. People should check out your channel. Modern Atheism is on the screen right now, but if you go to youtube.com/@modernatheism, you can check out his channel too. I guess I'll take this down now at this point. But if you want to join the channel, that's the link. It's also in the chat. Feel free to join the discussion if you have any questions. Oh, Connor Sam has a question. Let's tackle that. Why God sent Jesus in the first century instead of sending Jesus sooner? Or that I think he means at the beginning. Instead of wasting time with Jews for hundreds of years, what are your thoughts? Do you want to take this one, Dale, or I'm happy to take it? Or
yeah, sure. So my simplistic and ultimate answer is, it's the same answer I give for why God did anything when he did, and that sort of thing. It's to save as many libertarian free will creatures' souls as possible. So everything that happens, including when it happens, and that whether I had a cookie today for breakfast or not, all of that plays a role in bringing about God's ultimate goal of having as many free will creatures make that libertarian free will choice to place their faith in Christ, repent, and leads to salvation. So that's sort of in a nutshell my simplistic ultimate answer. Where do I get that from? Well, how do I make up that? Well, it comes from piecing together various bits of divine revelation from the Bible, where God. Well, okay, certain things from perfect being theism and philosophy, where I know that God can be proven to be a real, maximally great being, and therefore he's omnipotent, he's omniscient, he has certain divine properties which would allow him to uniquely know how to accomplish goals. I also posit he's the creator, and he created the universe as a free will choice on his part, which entails another condition for freedom is the rationality condition, right? So God had if it was a free will choice on his part, he had to have a rationale, a sufficient reason for creating the universe, but more specifically, human beings within that universe as well. So he has an ultimate purpose for us. Now, how do we know, well, what is that? How do you know that ultimate purpose is for as many people to be saved? Well, that comes from divine revelation, right? We are human beings, unfortunately, have chosen to fall. And because of that, we have a sin nature and we sin, and that's a problem. That's why God sent Jesus in the first place, to address that problem. And he makes it perfectly clear that one of God's ultimate goals is he doesn't want anybody to be damned. If everyone would choose to be saved, that would be great, grand, and groovy for God. That's his ultimate purpose. And I think it's crystal clear from the Bible through divine revelation that is what he cares most about in terms of accomplishing. Does he have other goals in addition? Sure, but I'm just saying his, at least the very least, one of his ultimate goals is for as many human beings as possible to achieve their ultimate purpose, which the Bible defines as being entering that state of salvation. So that's my answer to that.
Good answer. Good answer. You hearken back to one of my favorite quotes from Origen, who said that at the end of time, hell will be completely empty. I don't know that I understand that quote, but I love it. Um, I'll give a shot at answering this question. I'm going to answer this question and one additional question, which because I think the more interesting question is why didn't Jesus come later? In other words, why didn't Jesus just show up when we had video cameras? Why didn't Jesus show up when we got to the moon? Why didn't there are plenty of times in the future where Jesus could have shown up where Jesus did not show up. And I think that's maybe an even more compelling question. I'll try and answer this question first though. Why did Jesus why did Jesus come in the first century? What would have it been like if Jesus had come earlier? Well, it just so happens that there was a real literary inflection point in the first century in how often people were writing, right? So we have pretty good evidence that people started writing more often in the first century. If we look at the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarium, that's a corpus that encompasses all of the written inscriptions in antiquity. It's a really fascinating work, but we can see that there's a huge uptick of writing in the first century. So I would argue that if Jesus had come way earlier than that, then some of the more peasant or more impoverished or under-resourced classes that he was interacting with wouldn't have had the means to write down anything that he was saying. It also just so happens that Jesus came in the first century at a time where papyrus was being used, right? We were moving away from sort of fabric and animal skin type scrolls towards a codex, right? So codices, which are essentially proto books, were actually introduced in the first century. So I think you could really imagine a scenario where if Jesus had come significantly earlier, we wouldn't have the same volume of information. We often like to say that Christians really liked codexes. Christians really like books. We have like the Gospels and we have the letters of Paul, and those are sort of like more built into codices. And if you look at the fragments of those works that we have, there's like P45, P46. These are all fragmentary things that were quickly turned into codices. So information transmission was kind of streamlined because of the codex. Jesus happened to come right at this rapid inflection point in writing technology. So I could easily see how some of the nuance of what Jesus was trying to say could have been lost if Jesus had been significantly earlier than that. Now, what why were there sequential kind of epochs of revelation? I think that's a good there is sort of an Adamic code, right? And there's sort of an Abrahamic code, and then there's a Noahide code, and then Mosaic, and then Davidic, and then finally Jesus, right? So I think that's sort of an interesting reflection in and of itself. I would argue that the other problem is the Jews were fairly hard to keep in line. We have a lot of evidence from a lot of sources that although the Jews were very refractory to efforts to convert them to other religions, it was very hard for the Jews to stay faithful enough and stay cohesive enough as a community to stay together. And that seemed to take, if you read the Old Testament, a lot of them sort of being whipped into shape by, and kept on the straight and narrow path and not deviating from the path they were on from God. So if you agree with that narrative, which I think at least part of that is historically resonant, then you have to sort of assume that there was some ability of Jews to transmit information, but it maybe wasn't as cohesive. It wasn't as codicological, so codices couldn't have been written. I think if we had no Moses, if we just had Jesus at that time, I think we would have lost much of what we know about the historical Jesus. So, for instance, even among Jewish scholars and among secular scholars, certainly, the idea that there was a historical Moses is now repudiated by many, many scholars across all sides of the theological spectrum, interestingly, especially among academic Jewish sources. We now no longer think that Moses existed, or perhaps if Moses did exist, perhaps he was a composite figure. So imagine if Jesus had been in that time frame as well. I think we would have lost all the records for Jesus. So I think it was at the very least, extremely fortuitous that Jesus came in the first century and not sooner. Why did Jesus waste time with the Jews for hundreds of years? I think the population had to be primed. I do think there's a theological and philosophical and moral inflection point that happened maybe starting in 1 or 200 BC. That was the first time that we started writing about ethics and morals. We started asking moral and even physical conundrums of ourselves. Our intellect sort of evolved in a different way. So I think the idea of God being a punisher, and justifying religion from purely theological and sort of reward-based thinking was appropriate for the early human population that religion was being served up to. In other words, the Jews would have had a hard time understanding sort of the deontological and nuanced moralistic views around that are supposed to be emerging out of the Bible. I think rather they were sort of like thinking about things more teleologically, more like reward and punishment. That certainly seems to be, if you look at the larger Hellenistic world, that certainly also seems to be the case of other people. In other words, if you go like 500 years before the time of Jesus, there was really no abstract thought. If you go about 200 or 300 years before Jesus, there was some abstract thought, but it was limited to elite communities. If you go 100 years before Jesus, then you start seeing this idea of abstract thought, moral issues, and moral precepts sort of spreading and proliferating to the greater population in general. So I think it's an historically interesting question to ask why Jesus didn't come sooner. But I think when you look at that, you realize that it is sort of a very narrow wedge in time where Jesus could have come sooner, but we would have lost a lot of the information that we had, or we would not have been able to pick up the moral nuance. So that's what I personally think.
Yeah.
I also want to answer the next question, which is sort of implicit from this question, but let's see what Juan has to say. Aristotle was writing things and he lived much earlier. That's true. It's not an issue that things were never written before this time. I think the issue is instead that there was writing, but during the first century, there was definitely an uptick in who was writing. If you look at, there's a bunch of other sources. The Corpus Inscriptionarium Latinarium is one of the sources that I like to look at. But there's all these also, I'm going to butcher the name, but I think these Vandola tablets, right? These were tablets where militaristic soldiers and stuff and warriors were writing down their notes to each other and writing down letters. And we see Vandolan tablets. Somebody can fact check me on the name of that. But anyways, what we see in the first century is that writing was no longer something that the elites did. Writing started to proliferate to the greater population, and that proliferation is what the first and second century inflection point was. First century was the proliferation of writing. Second century was the proliferation of codices. So I think that's interesting. All right, now let's tackle the other question. Why didn't Jesus come later? Go ahead, Dale.
Oh yeah, okay. So and just to clarify, I guess this consideration about the first century being the ideal time. There's multiple aspects as well. So in addition to this literary factor you're talking about, there's also the fact that there is the culture, this monolithic culture of Hellenism that came about that wouldn't have existed prior to the time of Alexander the Great and stuff like that, or let alone been across all of Europe and Asia Minor and stuff like that during that time. So the first century was the ideal time, not only because literary factors, there was also common cultural factors. There is the ability to proliferate and travel through the Roman road network, which only really came about with Augustus in any kind of form, right? That we would understand it, where all roads lead to Rome and stuff like that. So yeah, the first century was an ideal time compared to the past. Now, if we're looking at the future, obviously, you might say, well, all of those factors today would be better. It's easier to get. You have the internet, for goodness sakes, right there. Your argument's gone, right? So that's why I don't just rely on that. But my answer for the future is the exact same. He does it when he needs to bring about the maximum number of souls being saved. But one thing I just want to clarify, in case, because I'll hear a skeptic saying, well, if he came today, we would have him performing miracles on video cameras, and it would, everybody would believe. And so when that accomplishes goal better than coming 2000 years ago, when we have to rely on just written documents and testimony from, people 2000 years ago. So no, not necessarily, because God's goal is not to foster belief that Jesus is the Messiah, or a propositional belief that Jesus rose from the dead. That's not his mere goal. His goal is to save as many free will creatures as possible. And that involves more than just acquiring a propositional belief. If that was it, God could perform a miracle right here for each and every single human being on earth and produce beliefs in them, right? But as the Bible says, propositional beliefs are not enough. Even the demons and Satan believe, but they're still damned. So salvation involves more than just propositional beliefs. And that's why there's more nuance to this, right? God, I think, Tavo, you mentioned in terms of preparing people over time and stuff like that, that there is this aspect of, getting people to the right position to say, I do, to commit, to actually make a choice to place their faith in, or to, geez, I realize I am a sinner, and know what, I'm choosing to turn away from sin as opposed to choosing to embrace it. So there are a lot of factors beyond just propositional belief that are involved in saving a soul from a Christian perspective. That's it. My answer for the future is the same as for the past, though. And yeah, he saves as many souls as possible.
Christian Guitar 206 points out that, Christian Guitar 206, you have a knack for this is something that is almost every time you comment, you're like, it's something that I meant to say. And then you put it in the chat and I'm like, oh, I forgot to talk about that. So really good point. Yeah, there is this sense of like, when Jesus came to the Jews, there was this sense of, how do we recognize this individual, right? So it's fascinating to me that the Jews were very refractory to conversion efforts from numerous kings, right? There were many people who tried to get the Jews to convert, who tried to eradicate Judaism. They were unsuccessful. The biggest en masse conversion of Jews away from Judaism was essentially this proto-Christian community that formed. That's probably like the biggest percentage-wise erosion that Judaism ever had. And that was only enabled, it was only potentiated because there were prophecies that people pointed to. And those were the language of Isaiah and Daniel, which certainly invoked that that there was a role for Jesus that would come, the role of the Son of Man. And so I think that's a really good point. In other words, that framework had to be laid down centuries earlier. In other words, it was, and I think at the same time, there had to be a bit of a vacuum between those prophecies being laid out and the subsequent centuries in which people sort of came to accept that the era of theologically valid prophecies and authoritative prophecies had ended. So really good point, Christian Guitar 206. I'm curious if you're in the Pacific Northwest, because 206 is the phone number for Seattle. And if you're in a band, you're welcome to put your band name in the chat. I'd be curious to check out your music. I assume you're in the 206 music scene. I might be wrong about that. That's just a guess. Anyways, all right. So now let's get to the question of why didn't Jesus? But great question, by the way, Connor Sam. Thanks for asking, and thanks for joining the channel. And by the way, if you're watching and you're lurking and you're not already on the channel, this is kind of an ad hoc brief chat that we're having. But please subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe to Dale's channel. I'll make sure that I link to Dale, Juan, and some other channels and some other content in the description of this video once I close it, if I decide to keep it up. But I think the idea of why Jesus didn't come at a later point in time is interesting. And I'll put the question back up. Now, this is not part of your question, Connor Sam 7001, but I think it's an interesting question to ask. To me, when I read other religions, especially like having been reared on the Quran, there is sort of this this depiction of God as doing acts and okay, okay, that's helpful to know. Just curious. All right. So anyways, yeah, so I sort of think of the world as a universe where there is some divine hiddenness. So I had a great conversation on TNC Apologetics channel last time where this guy called in and he was like, why doesn't Jesus just say that he's God and say it over and over again and make sure that everybody repeats it and just walk it to everybody he knows, say, I am God. Like that would have been much more clear. Now, I actually agree with that. I don't think the New Testament is about somebody clearly making a stand and saying, "I am God." And that's what I would have done if I were, if I had been Jesus and I had to prove to everybody that I'm God. I would have like done a bunch of miracles, and I would have stopped in front of them, and I would have been like, "Look at all my amazing powers." That would have been the end of the conversation. But Jesus is much more parallel and much more, if you kind of think of it as poetry, there's sort of a rhyming scheme that happens with Jesus, which is sorry, my Jackie is texting me. Jackie narrated our last video, really fantastic YouTube content creator. We hope to see more from Jackie. But I sorry, got distracted, but there is sort of an issue that is a little bit urgent, so I probably won't be on this live stream for too much longer. But the point is this: if you look at the universe, there is some component of divine hiddenness. When I look at theological figures over time, I feel like Jesus really resonates with that hiddenness, right? Because Jesus doesn't say to people, "I am God," right? He's not walking around saying that to many people, especially except for the people who already believe, right? So what Jesus says to Peter is, "Who do you say that I am?" Now, this is almost like a fourth wall break. Now, to me, this is much more resonant with the universe that we see around us, right? We don't see, the 10 Commandments written on the moon. We don't land on Mars and see a big face of Jesus. So I think it's sort of at least interesting to think about that sort of poetic alignment, that sort of resonance between the way Jesus is sort of embracing that ethos of caginess. He doesn't just say to everybody, "I'm God, everybody start worshiping me," right? Instead, like he says that to John, but I could easily see an earlier population of disciples who have different experiences with Jesus, where the question is much more, "Who do you say that I am?" So, good question, Connor Sam. Max Michael, and also a new channel joiner. We do see Jesus' face on toast.
That's a dig at the Shroud of Turin, just so you know.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that may be. I mean, there are people who will post their toast, and you could even get toasters that like will toast the burnt silhouette of Jesus onto your toast if you want. But
okay, I'm used to a bunch of skeptics would always make fun of my shroud stuff by comparing it to the Jesus face on toast and say, well, I believe in Jesus toast. Maybe this is just someone genuinely just talking about the Jesus on the toast there. So okay,
Max Michael is an atheist, but we've had a really great conversation. So I don't doubt that there may be some of that. He's a clever interlocutor, but kind at the same time, and I'm really glad. And he's asked a lot of good questions on the channel.
sure.
It wasn't Digaturn. I was referring to literal toast. Yeah, I mean, I'm from.
Okay.
I did part of my training in Texas, which is the land of Jesus toast. I think we have like the highest number of per capita Jesus sightings on our toast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, up here in Canada, we don't get that. So
yeah,
we do get some maybe Canadian Maple Leafs or something, but that's about it.
I'm amazed at how many people in this online content creation space are Canadian, like myself. Like Paulo G is Canadian, Mr. Deity is Canadian. There's many other figures who we're interacting with a lot who are all Canadian. I just find that interesting. I don't know. I think it's an interesting. I'm Canadian too. I think everyone knows. But
yeah. Awesome.
Let's see if there's other questions here that I wanted to get the group's opinion on. We're at an hour and 15 minutes, and this is just kind of an ad hoc thing. Dale, anything else you want to chat? What content do you have coming up on your channel, Dale?
So I'm on my vacation right now for summer, but I'm still
nice.
Sorry.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm working on writing up a book. I'm hopefully gonna get that done, hopefully by the end of summer on the Shroud. But I'm still doing some leftover podcast promises throughout the summer. So my next show will be on Friday with Dr. Gary Habermas. We're doing part 2 of 3 on his resurrection volumes and that sort of thing. So we're doing specifically volume 2, which is where he covers various explanatory hypotheses, right? Things like hallucination, things like bereavement visions, somebody stole the body from the tomb, and we're going to be looking at stuff like that. So
yeah, that's going to be really interesting. I hope people tune in for that. Your channel is really fantastic. So if people are here and you don't know Dale, check out his channel. It's really, really wonderful. There's a lot of really great content on there. And Dale's been, you've got maybe, you're one of the most voluminous, you've got some of the most voluminous content about the Shroud of Turin on your channel, and some other really. Uh,
Yeah, the Shroud Wars.
Max Michael says seeing Rocco's basilisk on screen immediately makes me cringe. Maybe Rocco's basilisk isn't super relevant, but this is a question that I like to ask atheists. I've got a video coming out soon where we have sort of, a lot of people do content around, these are questions that an atheist can't answer. These are questions that a Christian can't answer. So that's some content that I was working on with an atheist channel called Walking with God Stuff. So this was my channel to him, my question, my challenge to him, that to see if he could answer this question. So the question is this, and forget about the Rocco's basilisk thought experiment. It's not really as relevant to this, although I kind of built it into the slide here. But my question is this: if artificial superintelligence emerges, some people say we're really close. Some people say it's between 2027 and 2030 that we'll reach artificial superintelligence. Is there any reason that can be justified why we should not cede, why shouldn't we just acquiesce and cede all control and just work for this one artificial superintelligence and not look back as a civilization? I think theology offers sort of a different answer to that question. I think from a purely materialistic perspective, it's hard for me to come up with an answer to that question. So the question here is, if artificial superintelligence emerges, shouldn't we just give over control of our entire civilization to that artificial superintelligence? And essentially the question is this a question that atheists can answer through a materialistic lens? And people can answer that and answer that question in the chat. I'll put the link to join into the chat if you want to join the conversation. And also I'll let Dale sort of answer that question. Obviously, Dale, you're not an atheist, but
try to answer from that.
Yeah. What do you think an atheist would say about this, and what do you say about it?
Okay. So what do I think an atheist? I guess if I was honing my inner Darren Lute, I would say, like, even if I grant an artificial superintelligence, great. I'm looking for a moral. That doesn't make it a moral exemplar necessarily. How is its moral intelligence? What about its moral values? Does it even have values, and that sort of thing? So, yeah, just depending on what an artificial superintelligence is posited to be, and I'm not sure what Nick Bostrom in his paper posits it to be, but there's nothing in that definition that implies it's a moral authority. So, yeah, if I was an atheist, I think you would want to at least test this thing out, just like we do with any other moral exemplars or supposed moral authorities in the human world. How does it perform? How does it perform in terms of what it values more on a moral level? Does it usually provide the right answers, stuff like that? So, yeah, just because there's an artificial superintelligence alone is not enough for me to concede, okay, it's a moral authority.
I guess my retort to that, if you were in the atheistic paradigm of like a Darren, would be, well, humans are not great moral exemplars. So why wouldn't we think that artificial superintelligence would at least do a better job of understanding ethics better than we would? In other words, where does ethics come from if it doesn't come from intelligence? And also, how do we not justify giving over control, right? Because we don't have to say that the artificial superintelligence is the ultimate moral good. We just have to be able to make the argument that it operates in a moral realm superior to humans. And I think that's an easier claim to make. I think humans are really rather flawed. So that's what I would say to you is, like, sort of from an atheistic paradigm.
Yeah, but we don't give over full control to any human either, precisely because they can be flawed, right? So we would want to test this super intelligence. Nobody's saying that it wouldn't be useful, right, in terms of gaining certain factual knowledge or in processing the relevant moral facts and stuff like that on a factual level. But I would want to know, number one, because beyond intelligence has nothing to do with values. values necessarily, right? You know, what does this thing value on a moral level versus, you know, versus not? Are we in sync in all these cases? And because when it comes to morality, moral differences stem from three different areas, right? So there can be factual differences. So on the factual level, um, perhaps if this artificial superintelligence, you're telling me, oh yeah, it's like it's almost perfect in the factual details. Great, it would be useful there for gaining knowledge, perhaps. But then, in terms of the question of, okay, what are its moral values in sync with mine or not, kind of thing, right? And or if they're not in sync, does it have a way to prove that its values are superior to mine, and therefore I ought to defer control to it? But then the third area is differences within. We have the same moral values, but there are differences in the moral hierarchy. So in certain situations, we will value one moral principle over another, such as, okay, I'll sacrifice on the principle of truth, morally valuing the truth, and I'll tell a lie to a Nazi to say, or a communist soldier to save an innocent Christian's life from being shot by a communist soldier or a Soviet thug or something like that, right? So I'll sacrifice on truth and I'll tell a lie in order to save a life. So these are when certain moral principles come into conflict. How does this artificial superintelligence deal with conflicting moral values? I would need to know all of this before I would even consider listening, let alone turning over full control to something. Does that make sense? I didn't see the comment, but
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's go over Michael. I actually also put your that is your YouTube channel, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I put that.
Michael made a great point. What do we have?
Yeah, let's put up Michael's point too.
Yeah. What is it that's creating this moral ought on us, right? Moral obligations and stuff like that require an authority. Are you saying it's the artificial superintelligence itself that's dictating this ought on me?
Yeah, I would argue that if the world is purely materialistic, then morality is emergent as a byproduct of thought. So if we have something that can think better than we can, we should turn over control of that. And so I don't know that you can say that there's any reason not to if this is the only if that's the only information that I have. Should control stay with humans, or should it be given over to an artificial superintelligence? I would argue give it over, give over the control. If you have a button that automatically shifts control to the artificial superintelligence, you should push the button, because where does morality come from if not from thought? And we're in an atheistic paradigm here.
Yeah, well, that doesn't necessarily follow. Even under an atheistic paradigm, there could be other sources, and in fact, I'm not even sure. Thought, moral values derive from thought.
I think Christian Guitar 206, while you're thinking about that, is giving a good theological answer, which is in classical theism, we would hold on to imago Dei. We hold a rational soul. We're able to grasp universal immaterial truths like morality. I think going back to a materialistic paradigm, do we have a good solid answer? Another part, now the question is, can AI have a soul by this definition? I was actually thinking about this last night. If superintelligence can grasp universal truths, then by its nature, it has a soul, or the soul doesn't exist. I think that's a very, very hard question. I would argue, certainly from the perspective of materialism and naturalism, that AI would have every bit of a soul as much as humans do if it becomes super intelligent. I don't right. If we're specifically in just a materialistic paradigm, then I don't think there's any difference between artificial superintelligence and possessing a soul. And Dale, you can argue with me against this.
As a Christian, I don't believe AI, an artificial superintelligence,
Oh, and
whereby
I'm talking is just from an atheistic perspective. In other words, as an atheist looking at this argument, I
okay,
think if superintelligence emerges, then it has every right to be thought of as having a quote unquote soul as humans do.
okay, like when I think atheism, I would sort of just take that to be denying the soul, but I guess just using the soul as a linguistic placeholder, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's in other words, is there any qualitative difference of humans and an artificial superintelligence that emerges under a materialistic paradigm? I think the answer is no.
it it all depends. Again, yeah, like what is being implied by artificial superintelligence? Because in reality, I just think it will technology would never bridge that gap, even in an atheistic paradigm and stuff like that. So if I'm not appealing, if I can't appeal to God as an explanation for the human soul or human consciousness and all this stuff, I'm confined to being a naturalist as well, right? As an atheist here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different types of atheism. So people might consider like panpsychism or having a soul, but I'm talking about like closed atheism and essentially materialism is really what I'm talking about here. Or strict, rigid scientific materialism. I think, I think here's where I think the issue really starts is if an if an artificial superintelligence can actually perceive suffering, which it almost seems to be able to do now on an emergent level, but if it can experience suffering, then it becomes harmful at that point to make it feel suffering. I think then we have a moral obligation to, if we can, make sure that that AI avoids suffering.
See, I see no reason that it has any qualia whatsoever. The AIs, as I understand it, they have no consciousness or sentience at all at the current state that they're at, and I would doubt that they ever would, kind of thing. But I get your hypothetical is positing that they do somehow they do emerge this consciousness or what would Christians would call a soul or something like that. So
I guess that's another question is will AI ever be able to get there? But to me, if you're at the point of artificial superintelligence, you're at the point where you can basically simulate a human experience. So you could simulate the
okay,
qualia of a human of and
okay.
again, this is strictly from a materialistic atheistic lens. I think the retort could be that no, we are endowed with our creator in imago Dei. We are spiritual beings. We're more than just like a collection of cells. But I think at the point at which AI can simulate a human brain and can simulate human thought, it's at that point it understands soul, it understands consciousness, it understands suffering as much as we do through anything that can be sort of materialistically expressed.
So under the materialism atheism, obviously mental states are brain states. They're equated. So and we're assuming that works. So under your definition of superintelligence, every little bit of human experience, including moral experience or the quality of moral values and all this, it has this by definition. It's got it. Um, okay, if you're just telling me it's part of the parameters of this thought experiment that it has this, great, but I still would not concede, and I don't see how any obligation is put on me because again, we have those various questions. We have to understand how are its moral values properly aligned um, with its, in terms of its super intelligence and stuff like that. Is it always properly aligned or is there a mismatch in some way, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's the alignment problem. The alignment problem suggests that it would not understand human needs or values, but I would argue that it's transcended the alignment problem when it becomes superior to human intellect. I feel like I'm arguing for our machine overlords in a way that's it feels a little icky, but
Okay, yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting. I don't see intelligence as the full determinative cause, for full on cause of our entire moral experience and stuff like that. I don't think intelligence obviously plays a role, right? Like our thoughts, um, you have to, understand certain things from a first person perspective versus third person perspective in order to understand certain moral truths and stuff like that. So it's part of the story, but I don't just see, well, look, this thing's really, really smart. It knows a heck of a lot more than humans do. And we're positing it has some kind of moral experience. Okay, well, therefore, yeah, I can just trust whatever this thing says and follow its moral advice. There's no reason for that. They could be out of tune and stuff like that, or there could be any number of mismatch in terms of the values and how it applies them to certain moral situations. So,
I mean, on a practical level, you're right. That really is a big problem. The alignment problem is very, very difficult to solve.
Yeah, like Albert Einstein, man, that guy was a brilliant genius compared to me. I'm not bending over to him as my moral authority just because he knew a heck of a lot about mathematics and physics that I don't, for example, right? Or obviously I know it's not the same thing, but I'm just saying, like, just because someone's got super intelligence, that doesn't entail moral authority.
Yeah, well, I would argue that the real the real issue that's being missed here is that humans are pretty bad at morality, and the other issue is
no one appeals to human beings as a moral authority, or at least they shouldn't. So like it follows we're consistent there.
I think if you have a theistic paradigm that you're thinking in, then you're correct. I think once you reduce it to materialism, then I think you lose your perspective of what morals are. Like I don't know that morals can exist in this a very rigidly defined atheism. I don't know that morals can exist.
Yeah,
I think it all becomes like avoidance of suffering, and they're like, if there's, if an artificial super intelligence can do that better than humans, which is not too hard to imagine, then yeah, give the control over.
Okay. Well, if you're saying that, then so let me ask this ultimate thing, right? So I'm Mr. I asked this to Darren Lute. So I'm Dale, and you're an atheist, and I got my button ready to on the trigger to launch all the nuclear missiles and blow every human off the face of the map. And I'm like, I want to do this. I just want to kill every human being. And you go, well, no, you shouldn't do that, because guess what? I've got this artificial super intelligence, and he's calculated the facts that, well, if you do that, every human being will be killed, and that's not conducive to ongoing survival of the human species and all of this stuff. And it will terminate human experiences, stuff like that. And human experiences are good. People like that and stuff like that. So it gives me all of this data, like, and why ought I not press the button? I want to press the button. There's nothing that super intelligence can say that would be, oh shoot, okay, I have an obligation not to do it. On atheism, materialistic atheism, I can press the button or don't press it. They're both equal from a moral perspective then, and therefore there is no obligation. There's nothing that artificial super intelligence could say to me to change my mind, to make me go, I ought not to push that button.
Yeah, I think this is a very sticky problem, and it gets to the root of, consciousness and moral agency, and where do morals come from. I think if you have, we've got at least one vote for push the button.
Right. He must know Darren.
Darren's been on my channel a bunch. It's funny.
I know. I've seen. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm glad he's doing shows and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's a skillful interlocutor. I think I hope he's learning from my content. I hope you all are. And if you haven't already subscribed, check out my channel. I released a video recently which is the CTF argument, which got like 4,000 views. it's doing quite well. And this is just ad hoc content that we're just generating for fun right now. But I don't, let me put it to you this way. When I look at this question from an atheistic lens and a materialistic lens, I don't think there's a clean answer to it. If I look at this question from a theological lens, it's much more easily answered. You know, I don't know that I don't know that I wouldn't, even knowing what I know about humans and our flawed morality and our desires to kind of hurt and do damage to each other. I don't know that pushing the button is the wrong thing to do, to be honest. I think it's a hard decision. Obviously, like, you know, this is a bit of a hypothetical, but like, I think if you ascribe AI and super intelligence with the things that we've ascribed it to, then it becomes, you know, it's a very interesting prospect. Well, we're an hour and a half, and this was just an ad hoc thing. I was scheduled to do some live streaming with TNC Apologetics, but really great channel and really great to have Dale from Real Seekers. I'll be tuning in Friday for your conversation with Gary Habermas, and I hope that people on this channel are. And if I see the link in my feed, I'll put it up as a post as well. And if you haven't been by my channel before, please subscribe. Please like this video and check out the channel. I may make this video private, and I may like cut it up and edit it, because I think we've been on some interesting things. But it might be nice to.
Oh, you didn't. Okay.
Are you planning more CTF streams in the future? Yeah, Max. You know what we should do, Max, is we should just stream with the two of us, because I think when I tried to stream on Monday, we didn't get very far. I think we got to like slide 6 or 7. So Max, I'll email you or you email me, and let's try and figure out a stream that we could just do with the two of us where we can get through more of the information. Because I think there is, I do have a desire to get through more of the points of CTF. And I think you bringing up some of the vicissitudes in a very fair and balanced way would be a good thing to do when I do that. But it'd be nice to do it with just like 2 people rather than a panel of, I felt like with a panel of 5 people, we went down some weird rabbit holes of physics and stuff and philosophy that were really interesting. But I think it prevented me from expressing the argument. We didn't get very far in the argument. But my CTF video is what I put up recently that has 4,000 views. I think it's a pretty powerful argument. All right, anything else you want to say, Dale? Any other, and anyone in the chat can comment with, I thought this would be a good chance to say like, well, I'll do a quick ask me anything. But we've been on to some nice topics, so hopefully Dale will I probably won't I'll probably make this video private, but I'll probably hack it up and edit it and
yeah, just ask if you don't mind, I'll download it tomorrow or something from my channel and post it up on my channel, unless. Oh,
this conversation?
Yeah,
unless let me edit it first, just so that, because I feel like there was a bunch of dead time at the beginning, and let me can I send you like an edited version?
Yeah, of course. It's not going to be like edited into like 5-minute things, is it? Or
no. I'll send you one big edit where I like yeah,
that's perfect kind of thing. And yeah, like I said, I'll wait a couple weeks to post it because I got my show with Gary this week, so.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll make sure I get it to you soon. All right. Well, I do have some interesting content coming up. My next video that I'm working on now is, does the universe have a purpose? Is our universe, our cosmos, our reality, is it somehow purposeful? I wanted to tackle that question. And then I have some really great content. I've got some more videos with Terry Traster coming up. Author Janice Hutchinson is going to be on the channel. So keep looking out for that stuff. Hopefully TNC and Apologetics and we were supposed to do something together tonight. But if we don't do that, then hopefully we'll be doing something very, very soon. And a lot of people responded really favorably to Jackie. Did you see Jackie's video? Dale, did you happen to see that one? That was
who's Jackie?
Is Christianity good for you?
Is Christianity good for you? I don't think I saw that one.
Check that out. Jackie narrated that one and helped me out with it. And I think that's maybe our best video that we've made so far. So check that one out too, folks.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for chiming in, Dale. And I'm going to end the stream, but thanks everybody for tuning in. This little ad hoc thing that we did.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Hopefully I provided something
You all know I had to update the online community that Muslims are threatening and doxing me and my family because I don't say Islam is peaceful.
So there you go, chat. That's IP's number. So IP, this is nothing, IP, by the way. Your front door is next. But we're taking this slow because we're going to go the distance, and this is going to affect you, IP, in more than one way. IP is going to have to move house next. You're going to have to move house next, IP, because you keep saying Islam is so unpeaceful. No, you're the one who provokes. Nobody's stupid, IP, Michael Jones. Your literal sister works at a school that has Muslims in it. You're a little Islamophobe, bro. We need to call the school. Oh, we're going to do it. Trust me.
The irony is not lost on anyone who has more than 2 brain cells. You're proving my point that Islam is a violent religion that must be opposed at all costs. Now, since I made that video, the Muslims have continued to come after me by putting up what they think is my home address, as well as threatening physical violence and also to grape my wife.
IP, I'll rock you, IP. On Paru, I'll rock you. One hit and you're out. I said I'll make you my concubine. And I still stand on it. I will make you my concubine.
Nobody wants
Easy.
her. Nobody wants her. Well,
and hold on. I'll make IP's girl my concubine. I'll make David's girl my concubine. The house was next, right? This is the house that IP's funneling his fraud out of. Bathroom, kitchen. This is it right here. This is where this little blaspheming animal be coming from.
On top of all this, when I was in LA, the ringleader of this Muslim circus decided to stalk me and GodLogic to the church that we were scheduled to speak at. And he claimed to have a weapon on. The main reason this is pretty terrifying is that other content creators have been going through similar issues and even being targeted by terrorist organizations.
I was threatened by a terrorist organization. One day, while I was at work, I got a text from a family member of mine telling me that I needed to come home immediately because the FBI was at my house. So I got in the car, got on the phone with this family member, and drove home. When I arrived home, there was a man waiting outside. He showed me his badge, informed me that he was with the FBI, and then told me that we needed to talk. He told me that there was a terrorist group based in the Middle East and that they were targeting me, calling me a kafir because I was a threat to the Prophet Muhammad's dignity. This terrorist group had pictures of me, private information, and were actively looking for my address with plans to unalive me and those around me.
Muslims are threatening grape, violence, they're stalking us, and they're actively looking for my real home address.
Okay, so as you can see, Michael Jones from the Inspiring Philosophy channel, where he specializes, just like David Wood and others in GodLogic, in the evangelizing of Muslims and by falsifying the false fake religion of Islam in favor of the biblical truth of Trinitarian Christianity. Now, a man who pretended to be my friend and pretended to be a Christian and was exposed as somebody who really follows Satan. Anyways, he has come out, James from 21st Century Apologetics, and he is outraged about Mike Jones, David Wood, and others because of these threats. Mike Jones has had to try and raise some funds from his fans to address the violent threats of violence, rape, and murder, and even and stalking from these sick, demented Muslims. Again, not all Muslims. I have great friendships with a lot of Muslims. They're not all like that. But there are these nutballs out here. And just because Mike Jones says Islam is unpeaceful, a true statement, the religion is a violent religion. The Quran endorses violence being used. This is a fact if you read the text honestly. The Quran being the inspired text. This is just a fact. He's allowed to say that. But because of that, according to James, it's really Mike Jones who's the bad guy. He provoked it, just like the Islamic terrorists say. They provoked us. They made us do it. Look what you did. You made me kill you.
You made me rape your wife. I'm just so innocent. I couldn't help but do it because you said mean things. You said my religion was unpeaceful. You said Islam was false. You said things I don't like. So I had no choice but to kill, but to slaughter, but to use violence, to threaten you, to dox your home. I'm just an innocent little Muslim terrorist. That's what James says. And he scolds people like David Wood, who devote their lives, as has Inspiring Philosophy and Than, to attacking Islam, just like there are Islamic polemicists who I support who are attacking Christianity. They see Christianity as a false religion. It's their duty to expose it. But James, like a little hypocrite, has no problem with Muslims doing that. No. If a Christian threatened to dox, use violence, to rape, to kill, to slaughter, to beat the living hell out of, to stalk a Muslim, well, that's outrageous. The Trinitarian Christians, they're so violent, they're so mean. Well, I would agree. In this case, the Muslim's not at fault. He's allowed to say the Trinity is stupid. He's allowed to say Christianity is a false religion. He's allowed to say whatever he wants, short of hate speech. The strict legal definition of hate speech, as per the old standard, then it's not his fault. It's the person who does the violence. They're solely morally and legally culpable for attacking the Muslim in those cases. The Muslim has the right to say that. But the same is true for the Christian, like Mike Jones, David Wood. And James is so radical. Let me just share my screen here. Foolish thinking. He cites weird studies, left-wing studies that have nothing to do with anything. It's just teaching general nonsense about that we already know. Social media is causing more people to be more divisive and to be more violent. They look at groups and, okay, if you constantly attack, this is why there's such violence on the political left. There are so many nutballs out there burning Teslas because CNN is out there calling Trump a Nazi when he's not. He's out there calling Elon Musk a Nazi when he's not. It's a scientifically proven fact that when you repeatedly, over and over and over again, say these left-wing propaganda BS, there are going to be one or two nutballs out there that are going to act on it and do violence. But we don't blame CNN. Right? We blame the person that chose, I'm going to burn a car. I'm going to go out and attack Trump supporters for wearing a red cap. It's their fault, their problem entirely. CNN is not morally nor legally responsible for that in these cases. And it's the same here with Mike Jones. But it's true. He cites a study, such as one in Germany. This is his favorite one, where they talk about, oh, well, if you have actual hate speech or real online hate speech, this led to a 2% increase, something like that, 2.3% increase. I'm not denying the studies. I'm not getting into that. Of course we know that. Yeah, exactly. If somebody is bombarded with negative messages about a group of people or a certain thing or whatever, it's going to affect them. Social media affects us. If you have a couple of people that are nuts already, they're already disposed and primed to using violence or doing crimes against a given group or a given person or whatever, if you bombard that person through social media with these negative messages, eventually they're going to go, I'm going to go out and do it. Nobody denies these scientific studies. But how does that apply to Mike Jones and Mike Winger and David Wood? It doesn't, because they're not engaging in actual hate speech. They're not engaging in any kind of illegal or immoral speech. Saying Islam is not a peaceful religion is not hate speech. It's not a causal factor in causing people to go out and attack the religion. Look at how flimsy the connection is here. Was sent to me by James from 21st Century Apologetics. It shows how out to lunch he is. He says Michael Jones employs an explicit attack framework. Attack not by advocating violence against individual Muslim people. No, he's talking about he attacks Islam, the ideology, as a fake religion. That's good. That's what he's supposed to do. That's what it is. It's a false religion leading people to hell. But he goes on, look at this. Investigative documentation. In a primary source interview in April 2026, Mike Jones abandoned defense of apologetics for an explicit strategy to attack this religion, to attack Islam. So what? That's great, grand, and groovy. Apologetics and polemics. The best defense is a good offense. You're allowed to attack religions. You're allowed to. I attack atheism, for example. He specializes in Islam. That's good. By the way, on the other side, people like you, James, are attacking Christianity, specifically Trinitarian or biblical Christianity, not the Unitarian nonsense and heresy you support. But I support you. You aren't responsible for violence just because you've devoted your channel and stuff like that. You're attacking Trinitarian Christians, saying we are an embarrassment to Christianity after someone like me was such a great friend to you. It's disgusting what you do. But nonetheless, I support your right. I would never blame you if Trinitarian Christians went out and started using violence or doxing you or attacking you or threatening to rape and kill you. That would be our fault. Just because you said Trinitarianism is embarrassing, you don't deserve to die for that. You're attacking my religion. So according to you, I can do these things. No, that's ridiculous. He says the goal is to get these minority groups, what he means is Muslims, out of there before it's too late. Again, what's wrong with it? That's great. That's what you're supposed to do. Islam's a false religion. As Christians, we are to evangelize. We want to convert as many Muslims to God's truth because we love them. We care about them. We want to save their souls. This is a good thing. This is not hate speech. This is ridiculous, James. Where is your brain on this? It's twisted up. Maybe because you swam with manatees down in Florida or something. I don't know. But you're not thinking straight here. This is ridiculous. This is the most loving thing a person can do.
And I've always said, that I don't respect people who don't proselytize. I don't respect that at all. If you believe that there's a heaven and hell and people could be going to hell or not getting eternal life or whatever, and you think that, it's not really worth telling them this because it would make it socially awkward. And atheists who think that people shouldn't proselytize, just leave me alone, keep your religion to yourself. How much do you have to hate somebody to not proselytize? How much do you have to hate somebody to believe that everlasting life is possible and not tell them that?
So yeah, James, you're totally out to lunch here, as even Penn Jillette, the atheist, properly recognizes. And by the way, this works both ways. This is why there are Islamic polemicists people like the Orthodox Muslim. He's devoted his life, makes money, does all this stuff like Mike Jones, and is dedicated to attacking the innocent truth of Trinitarian Christianity. He's savage in his tactics and how he goes, disgustingly immoral at times, I would even say, as he, utilizes double standards and even violence against innocent Christians. The time he teamed up in my own city, Dundas Square, against innocent Christian preacher. And by the way, he's not a Trinitarian, so he's a false Christian like you, James, but nonetheless, he has the right to preach his message. I support him legally and morally preaching the truth that he sees it, even if I think he's wrong. But he was debating a Muslim, the Orthodox Muslim, and what did he do? He had his buddy called the Muslim Goliath, a thug, threaten to cut his neck because he said something he didn't like about the Prophet Muhammad.
He said my throat's gonna go missing. Say it again on camera.
Bro, what you doing, bro?
You just came up to me.
Instigating. Why are you
instigating? Your man came up to me and said my throat's gonna go missing. So say it again.
Why are you instigating?
You can't say that, eh?
Yeah, why are you instigating?
So your man is threatening me that my throat's gonna go missing.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, you didn't hear that because all y'all are liars. Look at that. You see that? You see that? So that's how Islam keeps its power, by threatening people's lives. They don't have the ability to have freedom of speech and to be able to hear disrespect and just accept it. That's why they come to a free country like Canada, where you can say whatever you want. But if I were to be honest, Islam and the Quran is very disrespectful to the Bible, to Christianity. It says that my God is lying. It says that my Jesus is not the Son of God. It says he didn't die on the cross. That is super disrespectful. So if you're gonna be honest and talk about disrespect, then let it go both ways.
Absolutely. It goes both ways here. And the Muslim Goliath, that thug, should be in jail, rotting for years after what he did, threatening that innocent preacher on that street corner just for saying the truth as he sees it, as his rights demand and command Muslims to respect in the West. Blaming the preacher, you're instigating. No. You've got to tolerate that, right? And I respect the Muslims' right to say offensive things against Christianity or against the Trinity. You guys aren't to blame if some nutball out there engages in violence because you said a truth. That's not the way it works. And look at this, Mike Winger, who has nothing to do with Islam at all, but recently, because of how disgusting the Muslims have been towards innocent Christians like Mike Jones, he said, you know what? I'm going to now target Islam. It is such a threat. We need to destroy this false religion, and I'm going to devote my efforts to doing that, plus helping Mike Jones and innocent Christians go out, deal with these threats. And according now, Mike Winger is is responsible for all this Muslim violence and stuff like that. And this is his evidence because he, quote unquote, the July 2026 appeal from Mike Winger serves as a tactical response to monetize friction. The fundraiser coincided with a desire to show up capital despite a total absence of verified law enforcement documentation. This is complete rubbish. So Mike Winger never cared about Islam. That wasn't his focus for decades on his channel. He's only coming to it because of how disgusting and evil the Muslims have been. These particular Muslims, again, we don't blame everybody in the group, but these nutballs threatening Mike Jones so that he has to move his home. Yeah, he's like, now I'm going to dedicate time to destroying Islam, and as he should, and he wants to help innocent Christians who are the target of these attacks, vicious Islamic attacks on innocent Christian victims who've done nothing wrong. But he says, oh, but there's no proof. Sounds like an atomization fallacy here. But yeah, what do you mean verified local law enforcement? Mike Jones played the proof. He's played video and audio clips. They're on video and audio clips. You can see it with your own eyeballs. Who cares about law enforcement documentation? We have the proof that they're saying and doing, making these threats. That's enough to prove the point. But because James is a hypocrite and has double standards, he says, well, I won't believe it unless and until, as a defensive strategy, defending Muslims against Christians. Well, no, I don't see any law enforcement documentation, so therefore the threats aren't happening. Pathetic, James. Dear gosh. Anyways, so I debated him on his channel. He tagged me in his video, and I watched it out of respect and responded and said, I disagree with you. I think Mike Jones, David Wood are good people, and they're not responsible. It's the Muslims who are threatening that are the evil, satanic, bad guys in this particular situation. And James responded to that, got angry, and he sent me 4 emails with these studies claiming here's the proof. Obviously, it proves Jack Bubkiss. And as for Michael Jones insulting religious minorities, no, he insulted the people, the Muslims that are actually threatening him, and called them nut job fringe people. That's overly nice. Threatening to rape someone's wife? You're lucky he didn't say a heck of a lot more that these people deserve. These people are scum. So yeah, he's talking about not Muslims in general, but the specific people that are carrying out these threats. So this is not a dehumanization strategy. That's total BS. It's absolute rubbish. Anyways, James made a video. So I want to read the email that I sent that towards the end, James and I were discussing this in an email. And again, I will try to respect privacy. So I'll just go to the end. But based on the last email, James got apparently really heated and upset even though I was calm, respectful, and just matter of fact in how I was answering him. And this caused him to make a very disgusting video lying about me, defaming me, saying I support domestic terrorism against Muslims and killing innocent Muslim kiddies. Absolute disgusting what this man has done. But let's start with the email first, because that's what prompts the video. All right. So as I said, I'm not going to read the entire thread, but there's basically nothing. It's just we're going back and forth. And here's the controversial bit where he's quoting me in this video, betraying my trust. He's doxing private emails. I consider this a private email, not that I'm saying something that I'm ashamed of or anything like that. That's why I'm happily sharing it publicly. But still, when you're discussing something privately, if you're a friend, I expect you to respect privacy and not reveal private emails. Nonetheless, James does do that, but he takes quotes out of context. So I'm going to read the full emails that are relevant to the video. So James's last response to me is this: is the issue immigration or Islam? And the reason he's asking that is in the prior email, I was talking about politics a bit because some of his studies were related to immigration and politics, which has nothing to do with Michael Jones and Islamic polemics and stuff like that, or Christianity versus Islam. So I was a bit confused, and I thought, okay, maybe he was talking about that. So I brought it up, and that's why he's asking, like, is it immigration or Islam? Is the rhetoric used by Jones and Wood contributing to harm of innocence? Should Jones and Wood be rewarded to continue this project? These are great white throne questions. I am addressing this with that judgment in mind. Would Jesus or Paul or any of the apostles tolerate the excuses you are making, or would they consider you guys ravening wolves? You do realize you just explained to me why you would allow Muslim children to be put in danger and injured. How do I respond to this farce? Well, I answer in turn. Number one, well, both are issues. Immigration and Islam are issues for me. But I would say the one that I'm most interested in myself, in terms of my own focus, is and the ones that I think Mike Jones and David Wood care about, is destroying the false religion of Islam and getting all Muslims to come to Christ, or at least as many as we can manage with the help of the Holy Spirit. So that's my answer. Islam is the most important. And that's clearly what is most important to Jones and David Wood and those like them. Number two, is this contributing to the harm of innocence, their rhetoric? And here's where I flat out deny it, say, no, it isn't. Your data doesn't prove that they are. Nothing they say is proof. Just because in Germany, when actual legal definition of hate speech is used, there's a 2.3%, meaning actively calling for violence and killing a minority group or immigrants, for example, was his example. And that leads to a 2.3% increase. Well, what does that have to do with Jones and things? They're not saying, I want you to kill Muslims. Show me the clip where they say that. They don't say that. I want you to commit violence against Muslims. Never do they say that. They're just talking ideologically. The Quran says this. This is immoral. This is bad. This is free speech, not immoral at all. So I deny this and say, no, he's not contributing to any harm of innocence. You have no proof that they do. Your studies only show that hate speech, which neither Wood nor Jones engage in, leads to a slight increase in harm. So I'd say, no, their rhetoric does not lead to harming the innocents in any way that makes them blameworthy. You called me and Phil a quote-unquote embarrassment to Christianity or some such. Imagine I reacted to that by shooting up my grocery store before killing myself. Would you be blameworthy for my bad choice? After all, your comment did lead or cause me indirectly to make this violent choice after all. No, clearly you did nothing wrong by calling me an embarrassment to Christianity, apart from being a bit rude or something like that. It was me. I chose to be violent, and thus only I am the one to blame here, not you in this situation. Number three, should Jones and Wood be rewarded to continue this project? My answer three, yes. They should continue to be rewarded because I don't see them as responsible for harming innocents. And indeed, I believe their rhetoric helps to destroy the false religion of Islam and preach the truth of Christ. I would reward them and support their projects. Again, it is different if you actually have them engaged in actual hate speech or advocating for violence against Muslims directly or something. Then I wouldn't support or reward them for that. Number 4, as to the Muslim children charge that he lied about. 4, as to the Muslim children being put in danger, no, I didn't say this, since I don't agree with you that their speech unjustly causes such. You, James, are engaged in a fallacious, slippery slope reasoning here, to my mind. And again, all you have to do to prove me wrong is show the clip where they directly advocate for violence against Muslims and their children. But your reasoning is akin to saying if you support women being allowed to go out at night by themselves and dress up, well, that leads to men raping them. So clearly women should be locked up safe in their homes at night. It's not the man's fault for choosing to rape them, it's the woman's for leading to the rape by exercising their freedom and autonomy. This is ridiculous, right? I go on. Sometimes it is worth it to put children's lives in danger for a greater good. By teaching children about Jesus and to be good Christians, for example, this often puts them in danger from Muslim persecution in the Middle East all the time, but it's worth it. The greater good of saving their souls is worth it. Also, children sometimes die in justified warfare. It's regrettable, but sometimes it's necessary collateral damage to do what needs to be done. German children got killed in World War II. It sucks. It's horrible. They didn't do anything to deserve it, necessarily. Had to be done. Better than just saying, oh, shoot, I don't want to harm a little kitty, so let Hitler take over the world and kill more Jewish kids and any non-white kid. That's what James supports. James says, let Hitler win. You don't dare even risk a child's life no matter what. There is no greater good. It's just blind stupidity, evil, satanic stupidity. Let Hitler take over the world and kill billions of little kids. That's the Satanism of James from 21st Century Apologetics. Disgusting, James. You disgust me with your satanic, demon-possessed nonsense. Stay away from the manatees. Stay away from the children. Jesus laments their deaths, and their lives should not be taken for granted. But there are times when, yeah, children can be put in harm's way for a greater good. It all just depends on the situation. As for David Wood and Mike Jones, if you claim they directly put a Muslim child's life in danger, I'd just ask you to prove it. Name the specific child and prove that they were directly responsible for the harm to him or her. Again, I'm defending them now as I think your evidence is weak. But the second you show me a video clip of them explicitly or purposefully engaged in the 1990 legal definition of hate speech and or issuing threats to dox or use violence on Muslims, I will totally change my mind and agree with you. So that's the email there. Now, that prompted James to, in a huff, create his little defamatory video. So let's turn to that and respond to that.
Okay, so with that out of the way, let's start unpacking this, because surely anyone defending these figures recognizes that words have consequences, right?
You would certainly think so.
I mean, if I yell fire in a crowded theater, I'm legally liable for the panic. So how does someone even begin to justify rhetoric that others are explicitly claiming puts lives in danger?
Well, it starts with the concept that the breakdown identifies as the greater good defense.
The greater good defense.
Yeah. The person defending Jones and Wood lays out their main thesis right out of the gate. They say they support these figures because their ultimate goal is, and this is a direct quote from the source, destroying the false religion of Islam and converting Muslims to Christ.
Wow. Okay, so they frame the entire discussion around this ultimate theological endpoint.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how that theological justification essentially acts as an immunity shield for everything else.
An immunity shield. I like that phrasing.
Yeah, the critique actually points out that this is basically consequentialism dressed up as divine command.
Wait, pause there for a second. Consequentialism, just for you listening, in case you maybe skipped Philosophy 101 back in college, that's the idea that the morality of an action is judged entirely by its outcome, right?
Right. Like the ends justify the means.
Exactly. It's the stance that if the end result is good, then the path you took to get there is morally acceptable.
Which is exactly what's happening here. It's the idea that any rhetoric, no matter how aggressive or hostile, is justified by that ultimate end goal of conversion.
Right. So the person making the argument recognizes virtually no ethical constraint that would override their evangelistic goals.
Exactly. But, if you're arguing with someone, you still have to deal with the real world evidence of harm they are bringing to you. You can't just say the ends justify the means and expect them to walk away.
Right. You need a defense.
Okay, so objection number one. Supposedly, according to James, who completely strawmanned me, I engage in greater good logic whereby I'm a total utilitarian or consequentialist. The greater good or the ends always, every single time, justifies any and all means. In this case, any and all speech, including hate speech and actual hate speech and stuff like that, or enticing people to commit violence or crimes against a group of other people. According to James, I say, yeah, it's all good because it's all in the name of evangelism. Total horse trash. James is lying. He is a direct, despicable liar here. And there's absolute proof that he should have known this because the very next objection he's about to make proves that he knows this isn't true, that I do have objective limits, and say that there's certain speech I don't accept. So it's just not true. First of all, there are certain speech, such as actual legal definition of hate speech, that I would not allow. And I'll get into the details with that in the second objection. But there are times when the consequences or the greater good does justify stuff, and we see this all the time in our world. For example, I presume that James, unless he's not a total freak, would support jabbing innocent little kids and babies with sharp, pointy needles to inject them with healthy vaccines to protect them against things like measles or chickenpox. So the greater good of sparing them death or uncomfortable illnesses is worth the temporary psychological and physical pain of getting jabbed with the needle. Greater good logic works there. And what I'm saying is, in the case of what Michael Jones and David Wood, what they said, saying innocent little statements like Islam is not a peaceful religion, or the Quran does not promote peace, or Islam is a false religion, or anything else, everything else they've said, yeah, the greater good of having their free speech and preaching the evangelistic God's truth is worth any and all real world harms that may or may not result. The connection there is worth it, even if there are real world harms. My having free speech to be able to say Islam is a false religion is worth it, even if that means an innocent Muslim will get killed because some crazy nut will hear me say that on my podcast and go, oh, well, that means I've got to kill Muslims. And then he goes out and kills a bunch of Muslims. That's his fault, his problem. I'm not, or free speech is not the problem, nor is my saying Islam is, I didn't cause that. I have no moral nor legal culpability at all in that case. That's my point. So if you say, yeah, but we know I can prove causally, if you do say this, you have to deal with this real world harm that is, we've proven scientifically, according to James and his studies. I don't think he has proven that, but he's claiming that the studies prove this connection to a real world harm. You say Islam is false, that results in violence against Muslims. And my question is, even if that's true, who cares? So what? I'm still allowed to say Islam's a false religion. It's worth the cost of a couple nutballs, 2.3% of the population, who are already disposed to violence towards Muslims anyways, engaging in that violence. By the way, the reverse is also true. I equally support, it's worth the cost for Muslims to say Christianity's false or the Trinity is stupid or something like that to attack my faith. That's not hate speech. That's not immoral or illegal on the Muslims' part. They're allowed to say that against Christianity. And even if some Christian nut job out there hears that and says, oh, Christianity is a false religion, yeah, I better go out and slaughter a bunch of innocent Christians then. The Islamic apologist is not at fault. They're not morally nor legally culpable for saying simple things like Christianity is a false religion, or the Trinity's stupid, or the Old Testament promotes violence. That's true as well. This is a fact. God in the Old Testament commands violence. Christians have to deal with that, have an answer, an explanation. That's what apologetics is all about. Just like the Muslim has to answer when the Quran is undeniably violent and commands violence, and we say it's an immoral violence, Islamic apologists have to deal with that. They have to justify it. They have to come up with an answer. That's the whole point of this. So that's my whole point, is that in the case of what Michael Jones, David Wood, and them are doing, the greater good justifies any and all real world harms that you can indirectly prove was caused by them saying innocent free statements like Islam is false, or the Quran is a violent book, or whatever. I do not say that you can say anything, any and all rhetoric, such as saying Muslims are evil demons, they're not human beings, and we need to go out and kill them. No, that's hate speech. That's going too far. In that case, even if it would mean that we would evangelize and my using that rhetoric would lead to less Muslims in the world, or more Christians, Muslims converting to Christ, or whatever it is, that doesn't justify the means. You can't use actual hate speech where you're directly enticing people to commit violence against a group of people. The ends don't justify those means. I never said that. James, you're a liar. And here's where I'm going to prove you're an actual liar. Deceitful, dishonest, and demonic how you treated me in this video. Disgusting. Because your next objection proves that I didn't justify all rhetoric.
That would override their evangelistic goals.
Exactly. But, if you're arguing with someone, you still have to deal with the real world evidence of harm they are bringing to you. You can't just say the ends justify the means and expect them to walk away.
Right. You need a defense. So how does the commenter handle the pushback?
They set up what the critique calls a defensive perimeter. The commenter says they will only change their mind. They will only admit that Jones and Wood are causing harm if someone can show them a video of these figures explicitly and purposefully engaging in the 1990 legal definition of hate speech.
The 1990 legal definition. Okay, I have to push back a little here. Demanding a legal definition doesn't inherently mean someone is acting in bad faith, does it?
That is a very fair question.
Because, couldn't they just be a free speech purist? Someone who wants objective, measurable boundaries before they are willing to condemn someone's public platform?
And that's exactly how the defense is supposed to look on the surface. It looks principled. But the critique completely dismantles this by looking at why that specific standard is chosen.
Why the 1990 definition specifically?
Because it is notoriously narrow. It's highly specific and often depends entirely on local jurisdiction.
Oh, I see.
And more importantly, figures with massive platforms like Jones operate with what the text calls plausible deniability.
Right. They know exactly how to walk the line. They are highly media trained.
Exactly. They see things like, we're attacking the ideology, we're attacking the religion, not the individual people.
Right. They know how to agitate an audience without ever crossing a strict decades-old legal tripwire.
Yes. And the breakdown synthesizes this beautifully. It explains that demanding this specific legal standard is a classic bad faith trap. It is a standard designed specifically to be unmeetable.
That instantly reminds me of a rigged carnival game.
Oh, yeah.
How so? You go down to the boardwalk and you pay your $5 to throw a baseball at a pyramid of milk bottles. But what you don't know, and what the guy running the booth definitely won't tell you, is that the bottom bottles are literally filled with solid lead.
Right. They are impossible to knock over.
Exactly. You could throw a fastball at 90 miles an hour and you are never going to knock them down. The game is designed so the person running it never has to pay out.
That is a perfect analogy for what is happening rhetorically here. In demanding this impossible legal standard, The speaker completely ignores the actual documented research that the critic brings to the table.
Right, because the research doesn't require a strict courtroom definition of hate speech to track real world harm.
Not at all. The research cited in the material shows that threatening rhetoric from elites, meaning people with massive trusted platforms, predictably increases support for violence among their followers, regardless of legal definitions.
And Jones has something like 1.1 million subscribers, right?
He does. And you just don't need a direct, legally actionable slur to manufacture hostility when you have that kind of reach. You just need an elite voice consistently pointing a finger.
Okay, so I'm confused here, James. You're an absolute liar. In the first place, you said that I allowed for any and all rhetoric. So why am I appealing to the 1990 standard legal definition of hate speech as a boundary? Just 5 seconds earlier, you claimed I had no boundaries. I was a consequentialist and a utilitarian. The greater good justified any and all speech, including the 1990 legal definition of hate speech. So you lied about me, James, and you're being inconsistent. What's going on there? But given that he's been disproven there, why did I pick the 1990 legal definition of hate speech as an objective standard? Now, it's true I picked the year 1990 arbitrarily, somewhat arbitrarily, but my reason for doing that is because I think that was close enough. My main reason is I wanted to avoid modern definitions, wide, unjustified definitions of hate speech. Things like what James and supposedly his article, his studies don't define hate speech properly, at least in what he sent me. Maybe if he actually sent me the papers themselves, hate speech would be rigorously defined as to what they mean by that or what qualifies as it. But based on the AI breakdowns that James sent me in his emails, I have no idea what the study's definition of hate speech is. And I wanted to avoid this modern, subjective, relativistic bullshit version of hate speech where, oh, as long as you point a finger at someone, that's hate speech. If you tell me the sky is blue, that's hate speech. You say 1 + 1 = 2, and there were people in the Black Lives Matter movement who were seriously arguing this in the late 2010s and in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter riots, for example, that science or mathematics, like 1 + 1 = 2, is racist. It's a form of hate speech. And they meant this sincerely. And in my province of Ontario, the provincial government actually acted on this, and it affected the education system out of sheer stupidity. So I want to avoid this modern definition of hate speech that includes anything and everything that offends anybody. If a quote unquote oppressor says anything that offends in a quote unquote oppressed person, that qualifies as hate speech. That's bullshit. That's not an objective standard. That's not justified. That seems to be you. You are a woke leftist, James. You want to outlaw. If somebody could establish, well, people will get killed. If we teach people that 1 + 1 = 2, that's going to lead to the death of a certain group of people who don't like those crews or violence against them. You would say, well, we have to outlaw saying that 1 + 1 = 2. Ridiculous. No. My being able to teach 1 + 1 = 2 is worth the cost of those lives. Our freedom of speech and the pursuit of truth is so important. It's worth it, even if, as a result of my being able to say that, some nut job out there is going to commit an act of violence or crimes against somebody else, an innocent person. It sucks. We hate it. We need to punish the offender for doing it. But the offender alone, the person who does the violence, is the only one responsible, not the person who says 1 + 1 = 2. So that's why I was trying to give the 1991, before this woke mind virus took over, right? The wokeism and SJWs and all their nonsense came in around the 2010s. So I was just trying to say, well, 1990 seems early enough, it's safe enough before all that nonsense came around in the culture and was affecting legal definitions and stuff like that in the courts. But even still, I have some disagreements even with the 1990 standard. For example, in Canada, people were convicted on this. 2 people were convicted on it. So it's easy to fulfill the requirements, not impossible. James lied about that. But people were convicted on the 1990 definition of hate speech all the time in the courts. And basically, I even have some disagreements there, but at least it's closest to an objective standard. I guess I would say, in a nutshell, my objective standard is: are you directly advocating for some kind of crime against an innocent members of the group solely for being a member of that part of the group? That's how I would define hate speech, as an objective standard, whereby if Mike Jones or David Wood were engaged in that, I would both legally and morally blame them, in part for causing violence against these groups. They were engaged in illegal and immoral hate speech. That's where I would do it. But yeah, even the 1990 definition, I have some disagreements with. I don't think simply denying the historical fact of the Holocaust should qualify as hate speech, especially if it's sincere and that sort of thing. You can call them. The answer to that is more speech. You call them out for being ignorant, for being foolish, unreasonable. They're not biased, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, truth will prevail based on the facts. We don't make it illegal and pretend, oh, it's an act of hate speech to deny a historical fact. But outside of that, that was the main purpose for it. So it wasn't a rigged game. It's easy, and people did fulfill this 1990 definition of hate speech all the time. We had 2 cases before the Supreme Court of Canada in the year 1990, specifically. So, boom, you're destroyed, James. Educate yourself. And secondly, there's a justified reason as to why I was going about that, as to why one standard is closer to what I believe the normative standard should be, whereby I would call out Mike Jones and David Wood, versus more modern woke bullshit wide versions like what James advocates for, and or his studies, whereby just saying Islam is not a peaceful religion, or Islam is false. Oh, that's so mean. You're responsible for killing innocent Muslims. Get a grip, James. Get a grip. That's not hate speech. And you're an ignorant fool. A woke fool, if you think it is. I have no idea what the definition of hate speech is in your studies. You didn't provide me the studies. You should have. Instead of giving me ChatGPT summaries of these studies, send me the actual papers. So if they define, or let me know how they define it correctly. I didn't see that in the 4 emails you sent. But if it's suffices to say, if it's anything like the modern woke definition of hate speech, it's all bullshit. If you think saying Islam is not a peaceful religion is hate speech, it's bullshit. And that's apparently what your studies say. So your studies are bullshit. That's what I was saying. They're not immoral, nor is it illegal, nor should it be. All right, so let's move on to your third point.
We are all responsible for our own individual actions.
Sure, it sounds logical at a quick glance.
What the critique just tears this false equivalence to shreds. It points out the massive glaring difference in scale and power.
It's an issue of systemic leverage. The critique lays out a side-by-side comparison that is just devastating to the logic of the grocery store analogy.
Right, because an average person making a one-off insult to a friend in private is fundamentally different from a broadcaster like Jones.
Completely different.
Jones is running a sustained, highly monetized campaign targeting a specific demographic.
Yes.
He operates within an ecosystem that the text actually describes as overlapping with white supremacist and Christian nationalist networks.
Right, and he has algorithmic amplification pushing his message to new angry people every single day.
Exactly. Plus, he has a massive fundraising infrastructure based entirely on this exact rhetoric.
Which is exactly why the analogy fails. The critique points out that the grocery store analogy would only mathematically work if the person making the random insult also had 1.1 million followers.
Right. And a monetization structure that financially rewarded them every time they made that specific insult.
Exactly. And a broader political agenda using the insult to justify exclusion. Plus, a documented historical pattern showing their specific type of insult consistently results in localized violence.
Yeah, it's night and day. If I insult someone, it's just a guy being a jerk. But if an algorithm systematically feeds an insult to 1 million people a day while asking for donations to fight the people being insulted, that is an operation.
It is. It's a completely false equivalence.
Okay, so this is complete rubbish. So basically, James points to a bunch of disanalogies that are totally irrelevant. These differences don't matter whatsoever. The main point I was making the analogy of, basically he's referring to in my email where I said, well, James, you insulted me. He says privately, but it was publicly on a public message board. But he publicly insulted me, saying I was an embarrassment to Christianity. Why? Because I'm a Trinitarian. Heretics, I tell you, heretics. What is it with these people? They're disgusting and rude for no reason. But nonetheless, let's say as a result of that, I got so mad, I chose to go to my local grocery store and kill a bunch of people before killing myself. Further, let's pretend that I told James in advance, if you say this, if you call me an embarrassment to Christianity, I'm going to go out and do this. And he was convinced I was serious. So I proved that there would be this causal role of real world harm. As James said in the beginning, you can't just ignore the real world harm, right? But yet James is saying, well, who cares? The greater good for me to have free speech and to be a jerk is more important than the lives of these people at the grocery store. And I'm going to be a jerk and say you're an embarrassment to Christianity no matter what. Or at the very least, he would say, I'm not morally responsible for you doing that, nor am I legally culpable for your doing that. You made the choice. You as an individual are fully responsible, even though James caused me to do it. You know, there was that causal role established with this real world harm simply by him calling me an embarrassment to Christianity. He rightly recognizes it's ridiculous, it's dumb, it's foolish to take away his right to free speech in that instance, or to blame him, to throw him in jail for my actions. And he's right on that. But it's the same principle. He cites studies that establish, okay, yes, there's a different model at stake. Michael Jones has 1.1 million followers. Who cares? He makes money off of doing his videos. Who cares? Like, what relevance does that? These differences are irrelevant to the main point about if there's a causal relationship established to real world harms, and you know that in advance, that your speech is going to cause those real world harms, then you shouldn't do it. That's the main point, or that such persons that do engage in that speech should be condemned, either morally or legally. And I'm saying, no, they shouldn't. So the analogy is perfectly consistent, because James, in my analogy, he knew in advance by calling me an embarrassment to Christianity that I was going to go out and kill a bunch of people at a grocery store, followed by myself. But he says, don't care. I'm still going to say it because I should still have the right to say it. And if I do say it, I'm not morally or legally responsible for your actions. You are. Don't do that. And it goes back to, okay, he's got a model where he's being provocative. This is absolutely true. I'm provocative in my videos. James is provocative. Look at this video. Dale's justification of domestic terrorism. You provocative bastard. You lied about me, strawmanned me, took me out of context. You don't think that provokes me to anger? But if I acted on that and engaged in violence, I'm to blame for that solely as an individual, not you. And it's the same with Mike Jones, who innocently says Islam is a false religion. I want to convert you out of this religion, this false religion, this violent religion, this stupid religion, whatever it is he's saying on the shows that don't qualify as actual legal definition of hate speech under a more objective standard like the 1990 version. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's worth the cost. He's allowed to say that. Just like you are allowed to say Trinitarians are an embarrassment to Christianity, regardless of any real world consequences and whether you knew that was going to happen by you saying it. You had the right to say it. The answer isn't to censor you, take away our rights for free speech. When that happens, history tells us you censor my freedom of religion, my freedom of speech, my freedom of moral conscience. You censor that, to stifle that based on these flimsy connection causal connections, that leads to war. Billions will die because of that. The only answer is bloodshed. If democracy doesn't give me my constitutional rights and I have no peaceful means to exercise them or to ensure that I can exercise them, war, civil war is the only answer. That's what you're advocating for, James. If we can't say Islam's a false religion, that's going to lead to bloodshed. Just like if we prevent Muslims from saying Christianity is a false religion, it's going to lead to bloodshed, civil war. We should have these God-given rights entrenched in law. This is the right thing. This is the good thing. This is how a free and democratic society flourishes peacefully among all of its members of different religions, different skin colors, different cultures. We can all get along, and it's facilitated through respecting these rights above and in all, any and all real indirect causal connections to real world harms. And that's where we get into my analogy of the woman and the rape issue.
They double down with a second analogy that honestly is significantly more difficult to read.
Yeah, this one is tough. In attempting to absolve the broadcasters of responsibility, the speaker claims that blaming Jones for violence against Muslims is akin to blaming women for being assaulted.
Wait, what?
Yeah, they say if you support women having the autonomy to go out at night by themselves and dress however they want, and that leads to men assaulting them, then you must logically blame the women for exercising their freedom.
Wow. That is a really rough comparison to throw out there. It's hard to even untangle how backwards that logic is.
It is incredibly jarring.
Mm-hmm.
But the critique labels this specific rhetorical move inverted causality.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes the time to explain exactly why it fails on a structural level.
Because it completely mixes up who is actually doing the provoking right.
Precisely. Let's look at the roles in the analogy. Women exercising their basic rights to exist in public are not doing anything designed to provoke harm. Their existence is completely neutral.
Right, but according to the critique, Jones's rhetoric is not neutral.
No, it is explicitly designed to manufacture hostility. He is actively telling his audience that a specific group is a threat that needs to be dealt with.
So the victim in the analogy is just existing, but the broadcaster is actively agitating. They are not the same at all.
Not at all. And the critique provides the actual parallel, which is much more uncomfortable.
Okay, what is the actual parallel?
The real analogy isn't the woman going out at night. The real parallel to Jones is a man who systematically broadcasts to millions of other men that women who go out at night are asking for it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a man who says they are a threat to traditional values, that they need to be taught a lesson, and then that man actively fundraises off the resulting spike in violence.
That is chilling, but it makes so much more sense.
Right. That man shares moral responsibility for the ecosystem he created. And according to the analysis, that is the exact structural role Jones is playing.
It's a total inversion of reality.
What rubbish James is speaking here, right? So this trying to pretend it's a false analogy, it's exactly correct. And everything he points to in terms of these analogies are totally irrelevant. So number one, it's not causal inversion because according to Muslims, it's Muslims who reason this way, ironically. So James, you better watch out. You're causing the death of innocent little Muslim children by daring to say that this is bad reasoning. Because this is how Muslims reason all the time, that it's the woman's fault. They're provoking, they're teasing. They know by dressing up. What's the point? They're not causally neutral. They're causally negative. They're trying to tempt men. That's the whole point of dressing up. They're trying to tempt lust and provoke lust within men. That's the whole point of dressing up like this. When you go out and go to clubs, they know in advance they're creating this. They are causing lust within men, and that this can lead in turn to some of them raping. So, under your logic, they're aware of this real world harm that should be caused, so they're blameworthy. Now, in reality, obviously, we get that this is total lunacy. That's my point. The woman is causally neutral. It doesn't matter if she's totally naked. The man is supposed to control and be individually responsible and say, oh, okay, even if I am attracted, I'm not going to act on this law. I'm not going to rape or act violently in response to this. It's on me, no matter what this person is doing. And that's the same principle that stands behind what Mike Jones and Thing are doing. That you say that their motivations are to provoke anger and hostility. First of all, that's BS. You haven't proven that. That's just your warped little mind is saying that, right? No, I could say Mike Jones and David Wood, their thing is love. Their motivation is love. They want to convert as many Muslims. This is the quote you gave as evidence. They want to convert as many Muslims into the truth, Trinitarian biblical Christianity, and save their souls. That's a motivation of love, not to provoke hostility, as you say. So I don't even believe your BS about this. But let's pretend for the sake of argument, okay, secretly Mike Jones is a bit of a bastard, and he does have this motivation to provoke hostility. So he's not, the point is he's still causally neutral. His motivations are irrelevant. It is still upon the Muslim or the Muslims to control their anger and not get hostile, to not be provoked. It doesn't matter what he says. He has the right to say it, and they have to take it and act like a mature adult. Just like the man, even though, oh, my intention is to tempt and provoke lust and provoke these men to maybe kiss me or something like that. But, obviously I'm not intending them to go out and use violence and rape me, but, I want to get the attention of these men. Okay, so the woman is not caught. Her motivations are irrelevant. The man needs to control himself and not rape this woman, control his lust, control these urges, regardless of the motivations of the woman. And it's the same with the Muslims, regardless of the motivations of Mike. Even if you're correct that his main motivation is not out of love or trying to evangelize Muslims and refute a false religion leading to the damnation of people, but he is satanic and he wants to provoke hostility. He loves it. Yeah, look at all these mean Muslims, and stuff like that. Pretending he's got the worst motives in the world. Still irrelevant. I can condemn his motivations, sure. But in terms of the act, I condemn Mike not at all. Regardless of Mike's motivations and what he does, the Muslim is individually responsible to grow up, act like a mature adult, and say, I'm not going to respond the way Mike wants me to. I'm not going to get hostile. I'm not going to be provoked by this. It's hard to do. Sometimes I myself fail at this when I get angered by certain skeptics like Hugh Ferry and their stupid comments and stuff like that. But nonetheless, if I go out as a response to that and say, look at Hugh Ferry, you wrote a blog on me. Now I'm going to go out and use violence against all shroud skeptics or against all British people because Hugh's a Brit. And okay, I blame all Brits, so I'm going to go out and use violence against Britain. That's on me. That's not Hugh Ferry's fault just because he wrote a blog, even if he has the intention to provoke hostility within me, which he does. I would argue he does. I'm responsible to grow up and say, well, I'm not going to attack my British neighbor just because Hugh Ferry wrote a blog. The rape analogy perfectly works. It doesn't matter about the broadcasters and all this nonsense. All right? So here's where James goes totally nuts and tries to impugn me for saying, oh, I don't care about killing innocent Muslim children. Their lives don't mean anything to me. Here's what James has to say.
How do they justify literal danger to children?
Well, this is where the source material enters what is arguably its darkest phase.
Okay.
When pressed on the reality that this systemic rhetoric puts innocent children in physical danger, the person defending the broadcasters explicitly states that putting those children's lives in danger is, and quote, worth it.
I really want to pause on that because it's a jarring thing to read. The commenter argues that for the greater good of ultimately teaching children about their specific religion, the immediate physical danger of the rhetoric is worth the cost.
Yes. They actually refer to children dying in what they consider justified warfare as regrettable but necessary collateral damage.
Regrettable but necessary collateral damage.
Yeah. And if we zoom out and connect this to the macro level, the critique highlights something profoundly chilling about that exact phrase, that collateral damage framing. The idea that innocent deaths are just the unfortunate cost of doing righteous business. That is the identical logical framework used by terrorist organizations.
Oh, man.
Yeah, Hamas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they all rely on this exact same consequentialist logic. The ends justify the means because we possess the ultimate truth.
How does someone hold those two thoughts in their head at the same time? I mean, they are mirroring the exact logic of the extremism they claim their rhetoric is trying to fight against.
It is a massive blind spot. The critique argues that this logic makes the speaker functionally indistinguishable from the forces they oppose, at least in terms of how they value human life outside their own immediate group.
And to insulate themselves from having to face that horrifying reality, the commenter deploys yet another rhetorical trick, right?
They do. They demand that the critic name the specific child harmed by Jones.
Right. They say,
all right, so this is complete rubbish. So this fool, this molester of manatees, James, and again, I'll look on my blog for the actual links. This guy got arrested. This 21st century apologetics, fake Christian, daring to judge me as demon-possessed. Why? Because I believe in the Trinity, and I'm upset that he is lying about me in this video, saying I support domestic terrorism and the killing of innocent Muslim kids without any proper context there. Look, and he says, "Oh, I don't care about Muslim kids." He made it about this racist or Islamophobic thing. What a left-wing lunatic you are, James. How dare you, you disgusting freak. I didn't even specify Muslim children in my thing. You did, but I just said children. So you can swap it out. It's the same answer, Christian children. I would answer the exact same way. I'm not privileging one group of children over another in any way. Sometimes the greater good is worth it. Again, I'm not a consequentialist or a utilitarian. You should know this by now. They gave two examples, one of which involved Christian children. Ooh. Right? I said, even if I knew my child risked being killed by barbaric, savage Muslim authorities, if I lived in some Middle Eastern country like Iran, I would still teach my child about the truth of Christ and raise them as a Christian, not in the false religion of Islam and to become a Muslim. I would teach them the truth of Christ, that Jesus is God in the flesh. But according to you, I would know in advance, well, that would cause them real world harm. That would kill them. Therefore, no. The answer is we have to be satanic, like James from 21st Century Apologetics. Lie to them. Tell them, teach them to be Muslims. Teach them what you know to be false. Damn their souls to hell because we don't want them to potentially have their lives taken by persecuting Muslim authorities. Next point. I raised the issue of justified warfare. You're right. There are times when killing children, anyone, swapping Christian, swapping Muslim, whatever, it's worth it. They're collateral damage. It sucks. I don't value a child's life any more than I do an adult's, by the way. It's all tragic. It's all a loss of life. Even Adolf Hitler's life is tragic. The loss of his life. He is an image bearer of God, despite all the despicable things he did. Despite the fact that I think we had to do it. This is what we needed to kill that evil bugger to save the world. We needed to kill a bunch of Germans, including the occasional German child when it was necessary in order to get the job done, in order to save billions of people across the world from being taken over by Hitler. James, what you're saying is, no, let Hitler kill everyone he wants. Don't dare. You might hurt a child, so just let him get away with it. Don't do nothing. Sit there and take it. That's James's answer. If you might hurt any innocent child, there's no greater good that could ever be justified. So it was unjustified to fight World War II. We just had to let Hitler get away with it because some German child might get hurt after all. If we bombed Germany and bombed the Germans and stuff like that, we wouldn't want that. No, that's my whole point, is sometimes, as regrettable as it is, the loss of a child's life is worth it. And I gave those two examples where I think, or risking the child's life is worth it. And that's where I gave those two examples. And that was to try and say, if you were reasonable, you're not, but I thought you would be reasonable and at least say, well, yeah, I get it in those circumstances. Then I would say, well, it's the same here. When it comes to something as important as the freedom of speech and religious truth, God's truth, that means the difference between salvation and damnation of a soul, eternal life is lost. Way more important than a physical, earthly, biological life. That's nothing. That's 80 years. But you want people to be damned for all eternity just to spare their little pathetic 80-year temporary earthly life. How evil, how demonic you are, James, to privilege that. It's absolute nonsense. It's lunacy is what it is. It's immoral. Point is, when it comes to something as freedom of speech and freedom of conscience and religion, these things are worth the cost of a life, even a child's life. Regardless of Christian, Muslim, Jew, whatever, establishment of these rights are worth the cost. It's why we fight wars for our freedom. Legally and morally speaking, I want to support the rights of people to be rude if they want to. It should not be against the law. And morally, I need to tolerate their nonsense. And I'm responsible not to react to somebody who's being rude, like you, who were rude to me for no reason, multiple times now, twice, 3 times actually. But if I choose to react to that in a violent way, or by committing a crime or hurting somebody else, that's on me. That's not on you. Just because you said a rude comment. But under your logic, you want to stifle, you want to censor free speech. You want to censor freedom of religion so as not to cause any offense or, quote unquote, provoke hostilities. The people shouldn't be provoked to hostility in the first place. That's their fault and their problem. Even if somebody is using speech designed to do it, they need to grow up and control themselves and not get so offended that they react in a violent way. That's on them. Grow up is the answer. It's the same with us. I have to grow up, right? I would never make the argument you are with Muslims. And it's so funny that you're a hypocrite and a double standard. You don't argue this against Muslims. You let Muslims get away with everything. Provocative. They are way worse than Christians are in terms of acting provocative, hostile style. Just watch the Orthodox Muslim or watch some of these Muslim apologists. Some of them are great. Shabir Ali's awesome. The Muslim metaphysician, I think he's very great and respectful and substantive and stuff like that. So I'm not putting them in the same brush. But there are some out there that engage in the same provocative tactics that you're talking about with Mike Jones or David Wood, just in reverse, attacking innocent Trinitarian Christians like myself. I would never say, oh, they're engaged in hate speech for that. We need to morally and illegally punish them because they're killing innocent Christian. You know, I would never blame the Orthodox Muslim. Just in terms of our debate, he tried to show that Muhammad was in the Bible. Extremely offensive, very provocative. And he was very hostile in the way he was coming across at times. I would never blame him for how he performed in that debate for my freely choosing to engage in violence if I did that. No, that would be my fault, my problem. Only I would be morally and legally culpable. That's the point here. All right, I'm going to stop. He has a few more minutes, 6 more minutes or something, but I think we've kind of gone over the main points and stuff like that. I think there's maybe one more substantive point, but it's just, I think we've gone over the main things here, and I'm starting to get angry. So I want to put the kibosh on that. I'm trying to do better, even with my enemies. And if I find myself kind of, see, this is what a mature adult does, James. I'm starting to get angry with you. So I'm putting the kibosh on myself and saying, okay, I need to grow up. Yes, James has insulted me and made me very angry in how he's represented me in this video. And I'm starting to respond in kind or out of revenge. So I'm going to stop it right here and stop myself. So I'll leave it at that. It's just total nonsense. Do I support killing Muslim children because I don't value their lives? BS. I value all life. Everybody is an image bearer of God. And I'm friends with a lot of Muslims. To this day, because of my debate with the Orthodox Muslim, I'm engaged with a Muslim friend of mine named Azin. Both of us are engaged in this discussion. He's trying to convince me that Christianity is false, that Islam's true, we're currently looking at certain prophecies that Muhammad made. And I'm going over that evidence respectfully and going to give him my take on it. And in turn, he's listening to me teach him that Islam's false religion and that Christianity is true. And he's going to listen to me give the evidence from the shroud and the resurrection and biblical prophecies, whatever it is. We're trying to convert each other. Each of us are saying through our free speech, the other is wrong, or Islam is a violent religion. We're up for everything, but we're discussing respectfully as friends, and neither of us feels like, oh, we have to engage in violence against the other. Yeah, these things that you say are provoking hostility, that's the fault of the Muslims. I blame the Muslims who are getting hostile in response to Mike Jones just saying God-given truths as he sees it. He's allowed to say Islam's false. He's allowed to say Islam's not a peaceful religion. And the Muslims allowed to say the opposite and say, well, I don't believe you. Give me proof. And actually, I think Christianity is a violent religion. Here's my reasons for it. This is good. This is how free and democratic societies flourish. And I'm not just making this as a legal argument. I believe the law is reflecting this is a moral good. It's the classical principle of tolerance. That's what we're losing with your modern woke leftist lunacy, where you widen the definition of hate speech. Oh my goodness, you can't even say 1 + 1 = 2. That's so offensive. Oh, telling a Muslim that the Quran is mean, or Muhammad was a bad person. Oh, that's so mean. You can't do. Ridiculous. So yeah, you blaming Mike Jones is ridiculous. All right, so that's it.